Hello guys, this is your friend What If Naruto and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Minato kills Obito on the night of the Kyuubi attack and Kushina escaped to Kumo with Naruto Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please give me hype instead of comment and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It was supposed a grand occasion for the Uzumaki Namikaze family. Tonight, Minato and Kushina were supposed to be filled with laughter, good tidings and sake once the son and heir of their two clans was born. However, the fates can be cruel, and the three sisters severed one particularly cruel thread on this night. A massive 40-story fox with 9 powerful swishing tails was standing over the village and leaving a trail of destruction. Alarms rang across Konoha, and ninjas were evacuating civilians to the shelters. As they ran, fire descended upon their village and laid waste indiscriminately to structures and life alike. In this chaos, brave shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato firmed their resolves and threw themselves into a fight they had no hope of winning. Every life sacrificed bought a second of time for their loved ones to evacuate. Every life sacrificed to the Biju demonstrated the resolve of the will of fire. Leading the charge was Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime, 3rd Hokage of Konoha. His successor had asked him to buy some time so that he may deal with the intruder that caused this whole mess. Hiruzen coordinated the shinobi forces of Konoha in various delaying and distracting actions against the beast that towered over the village, yet the destruction still rained down upon his village. As Hiruzen looked up into the blood-red and black-slitted eyes of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, he noticed the imprint of a Sharingan that was supposed to be lost to time. The Mangekyo Sharingan pattern was almost translucent as it spun on the iris of the Kyuubi. An image of Madara Uchiha glaring at him during his childhood flashed through his mind. He cursed whichever Uchiha caused all of this destruction and reaffirmed his efforts to protect his village. Calling upon his summon partner, Enma the king of the Monkey clan, he jumped into battle with the strongest of all known Biju. Minato was breathing hard as he strained his chakra network to operate above its maximum capacity. He had saved his wife and child and just finished the fight with the masked man. A smoking crater with a spiral pattern could be seen burnt through the cloak of the masked individual as he lay face down in the dirt. Minato walked over to the man, ignored the fleshy hole he had dug into him, flipped him onto his back with his foot and removed the mask. Minato gasped in shock as the face, or at least half of the face, that he saw staring lifelessly into the sky. It was his former student, Obito Uchiha, declared Kia nearly 4 years ago. Obito's Sharingan eye stared blankly into the sky and Minato decided that more research would need to be done. He sealed the body into the scroll he procured from one of his pouches and disappeared in a yellow flash to go protect his village. Minato focused on the Hiraishin marker of the Sandaime Hokage and appeared next to the downed form of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Minato grabbed the Sandaime and flashed him to Konoha's hospital. He summoned a Kage Bunshin, shadow clone, to write out a note explaining the body sealed in the scroll and what transpired that night. He tucked the scroll into Hiruzen's pocket and left him under the protection of his clone to confront the beast. After Obito died, there was a momentary lapse in the Kyuubi's attack as it regained its free will. Then the petty humans continued to attack and antagonize the creature. As the Kyuubi was preparing to respond, a yellow flash caught its attention. Then it felt pain as a large, blue, spinning orb crashed into its head. Since it was disoriented, it couldn't fight the pull on its chakra as the human with yellow hair transported it far away from the village. As the Kyuubi shook of the disorientation, it noticed that the yellow-haired human was standing on top of a toad summon that it recognized. The great Kitsune decided that the strength of this human merited words. Ninjin, I don't suppose you would just let me walk away from here. I am finally free and will not go back into a cage. The Kyuubi's gruff and powerful voice echoed across the clearing. Minato was stunned, and so was Gamabunta for that matter. The Kyuubi just opened a conversation. Kyuubi, I didn't know you could speak. The Kyuubi snorted loudly at the insinuation. You short-sighted mortals never considered that us Biju were sentient beings. Your petty minds always go straight to fear when you don't understand something. Your greed directed you to seek our power. So, Ninjin, are you going to fight me? Minato took a battle-ready stance as his mind raced over a mile a minute to come up with something. Okay, Kyuubi, it saddens me to admit that mankind will never let you or your kind be free. However, I will offer you sanctuary in my son. The man I killed tonight had the same eyes as Madara Uchiha, and that is how he was able to control you. If you escape from here, you will need to live life on the run. If we form a contact of sorts, you could be held safely within my son. The Kyuubi flinched at that. It was the one man that had made it feel completely helpless. Curse the sage for giving such power to these mortals. She also hated to admit that this petty human had a point. She was locked out of the demonic realm for some reason she had yet to discover, and she knew she wouldn't be able to retreat there at this time. Minato sighed at the response. Is there some contract we could come up with to resolve things peacefully? And we need to hurry with negotiations because ninjas will be coming here to finish the fight. The Kyuubi pondered upon Minato's words. The demoness knew that it was nearly time for her mating cycle, something that only occurred once every 200 years, and she dearly wished for kits. She could send this mortal to her kingdom upon his death and have him check on her lands. He seemed honorable enough, and she begrudgingly admitted that she felt a rare sense of honor coming from the man. Very well, Ninjin, if you form a contract with me, the price is your soul. I have need of a man with your skill set. In return for your soul, I will spare your village and create a seal of my own choosing to reside in your child. Minato paled at that. He only had one jutsu that could possibly deal with the Kyuubi, and the price was the same to use that jutsu. So, which would he prefer, the Kyuubi or the Shinigami? Minato shivered internally at the thought of the Shinigami's stomach. He firmed his resolve and nodded his head at the Kyuubi. Very well, state the terms of your contract. Minato said in a hardened and resolved voice. Your son is the only one allowed to be my container. He already has my power in him from gestating next to me. The seal must allow me certain freedoms, and once I raise your son into a man that will purify this human world, I will be released, and he will become my husband. Your son will be bound by this contract to do everything in his power to return me to Makai and not let me be sealed into another vessel. Minato gulped at that. Kushina would kill him for this, but it was probably better than attempting to force the Kyuubi into a Shinigami seal and pray that it didn't destroy his son from the inside out. Why do you want my son for a husband? The Kyuubi chuckled at that response, and in turn the massive chakra entity condensed into a red-haired beauty that stood regally before Minato. The woman was 5'7" with long, illustrious red hair that sank to below a beautiful posterior. From said posterior, 9 red tails glowed with power as they swished around the form of a goddess. She had a heart-shaped face that radiated beauty with glowing alabaster skin that surrounded red slitted eyes. The orangish-red ears with black inner lining twitched with irritation as Minato stared at her kitsune transformation. Minato thought that he would be doing his son a favor if he got to marry such a goddess, air demoness. My mating cycle is coming up in roughly 20 years. You humans killed my previous kits for greed during the clan wars, which is why I started annihilating your filthy kind centuries ago. I want more kits, and I sense something great in that child. Since he was born amongst my potent chakra, he will grow to be something special. From inside my seal, I will be able to complete his change into a Hanyu, a half-demon as you mortals would call it. I wish to raise a family, and the only suitable mate I see in the next 20 years is your son. Sadly, you love that mortal woman, or you may have sufficed. The last statement was said with such a seductive tone that Minato, the great Yondaime Hokage, gulped. Oh, okay then. What conditions do you require for your seal? Second, I need to notify Kushina of this contract. Finally, I need your word that you will not destroy Konohagakure or attempt to break the seal. The Kyuubi held up one hand, and in a burst of red flames a contract appeared. Minato reviewed the contract and watched as the demoness put her hand upon the paper. A chakra imprint of her hand resided over her name. Minato noticed her name and chuckled as he cut his palm, smeared blood on his fingertips and then placed his hand on the contract. Nice to meet you, Hikari. Be nice to my soul, will you? You truly are a worthy human. Worry not, you will be sent to the demonic realm, and you will manage things there for me until I have the chance to return with your son. When the time is right, and if I find her worthy, I will make Kushina the same offer as well. Despite her raucous and rude behavior, I found myself pleasantly surprised by her aura. Unfortunately, the seal did not let us interact and it was rather uncomfortable, which kept me in a foul mood. So, Minato Namikaze, go and bring me your wife and son. Do hurry, those humans will be here in 10 minutes. Minato nodded and flashed away as a streak of yellow light. He returned a minute later with an unconscious Kushina and the quiet baby Naruto. As Hikari took Naruto in her hands, he looked up at her with the most beautiful azure blue eyes that touched Hikari's soul. Call it a mating instinct, call it destiny, call it a twist of the fates, but she felt it in this boy. Hikari placed a tender kiss on the boy's forehead before placing him onto an altar that she summoned. Hikari turned to Kushina's crumpled form in Minato's arms and she put one hand on the former resting place of Kushina's seal. Her hand glowed a brilliant, ruby red as she channeled some of her chakra into her previous host. Without her chakra, the woman would likely die due to the damage to her chakra network. Color returned to Kushina's face, and her eyes cracked open. She was still very out of it, but she was at least conscious for this and would survive. As Kushina looked back on this day, she would remember it more like a lucid dream than a solid memory. Minato smiled as his wife came back to him. He placed a loving kiss on her lips before he set her down. Kushi-chan, we don't have much time. I need you to remember that I made a deal with the Kyuubi. It will be a good thing for our family, and I will see you in the next life. You are my fiery red habanero, and I will love you forever. With that, Minato placed another kiss on the confused woman's lips. Minato stepped back and let Hikari take over from there. Hikari created a copy of the contract and placed it in Kushina's hands before she joined Minato next to the altar containing his son. For what it is worth, Minato, I find you worthy and I will have mercy on your soul. You will be sent to my realm, use this document to rule in my stead. Gain support to restore the portal to this realm. She then placed 2 fingers on Minato's forehead and channeled her yokai, demonic chakra, into him. Minato glowed red all over before slumping to the ground, dead, with his soul being sent to Makai. Okay, Naruto-kun, I am in your care. She placed both hands on Naruto's stomach and created the seal of her own making. She would watch on from in the seal and test her future mate when the time came. Kakashi was the first to arrive on the scene. He saw the sleeping form of Kushina and the crumpled body of his dead sensei. Tears filled his eyes as the realization hit him that his sensei was dead. He was halted in his misery as Kushina choked out a few words. Kakashi, bring me, Naruto. Destroy, alter, hurry. Kakashi remained stunned for the briefest of moments before following the instructions of his sensei's wife. Kushina held Naruto in her arms and whispered into his ear. Kyuubi, if you can hear me, you need to hide the seal. It is to protect Naruto. There was a brief chakra flash and the dark black lines of the seal on Naruto's stomach disappeared. Kakashi noticed this and widened his eyes, but Kushina silenced him with just a look. Kakashi turned around suddenly as hundreds of chakra signatures appeared behind him. At the front of the group were Hazashi and Hiyashi Hyuga, Fugaku and Makoto Uchiha, Shikaku Nara, Inoichi Yamanaka and Choza Akamichi. They all processed the downed form of Minato and many heads sunk to chests in respect for their fallen leader's sacrifice. Fugaku finally took the lead and spoke. Kushina, what happened to Minato and the Kyuubi? Kushina, played up at being a weak woman, which wasn't much of a stretch at the time, responded in a cracked voice. Minato, sacrifice, himself to, send, Kyuubi, to demonic, realm. Fugaku stood up and reeled at the implications. Minato defeated the Kyuubi, and the village was safe. His rival was one hell of a man and deserved respect. Fugaku took charge of the crowd of ninjas, and he scooped Kushina into his arms as she held baby Naruto. He noticed the 6 whisker marks on the child's face and decided that he would ask Kushina about it later. For now, he would let the mother slumber peacefully with her child in her arms. Chapter 2 Unraveling. Kushina awoke at the crack of dawn from a restless sleep that did nothing to alleviate the worries she held deep in her heart. She was never a morning person, but she would put up with anything for her Sochi. She went through her morning routine on autopilot as she reflected on what led up to her current situation. It all started when she awoke in Konoha Hospital with her son in her arms. She smiled down on her beautiful blonde baby boy, and for a minute the hole Minato left in her heart was filled. Her friends would stop by the hospital to check in with her, but her body was crippled from the Kyuubi being ripped out of her. Tsunade forced her to stay in the hospital for a whole month and she was too weak to fight against the woman. She was just grateful Tsunade came back to help her get on her feet. During that month, Tsunade performed a bunch of procedures that would end up helping her return to her normal life. Unfortunately, since the Kyuubi was ripped out while Kushina was giving birth, her reproductive system was completely destroyed. She would never be able to have another child, which broke Kushina's heart and caused her to latch onto baby Naruto even tighter. The damage to her chakra network was substantial and Tsunade was stumped because all prior reports indicated that a biju leaving its host would kill said host. She chalked it up to the Uzumaki vitality in the end, which the Konoha Council accepted. After a month, Kushina was allowed to take Naruto home to the Uzumaki compound. That was another thing, the damned council and their damned rulings. Naruto's official birth certificate named him Naruto Uzumaki and she was denied the right to name him Namikaze. The council denied Naruto the Namikaze inheritance and tried to claim that they were doing so in Naruto's best interest, since Minato had so many enemies. Kushina did hold the original birth certificate with Minato's name on it, but she was threatened with the death penalty if she ever revealed that information without the council's prior approval. Needless to say, many Anbu were sent to the hospital during that council meeting. Even though she was far from her prior strength, she was an infuriated mother and a scorned wife by the council. She declared that she would take a leave of absence to raise her son, which was a right all mother shinobis were granted. The council granted this motion simply to get the rampaging woman out of the council chambers. The first thing Kushina did was remove her and Kakashi's chakra signature from the seal array on the Namikaze compound, and she then sent the seal array into lockdown mode. Those damned counselors would never get their hands on Minato's research in jutsu so long as she lived. Secretly, she added Naruto's chakra signature as the master of the Namikaze seal array because it was his by birthright. Without Naruto's chakra, the compound would remain in lockdown. The lockdown included a nature-powered chakra barrier that made the compound invisible, and the barrier could take a couple hits from Bijudama before imploding. In time, she would tell Naruto and he would be able to access his father's library in secrecy. Over the past 3 years, her relationship with the Uchihas had gone down the drain. She still loved Makoto and her daughter Itachi, but she hated Fugaku with a passion. Fugaku Uchiha, the Godime Hokage, was never a great man. He was tolerable at best and downright damnable at the worst of times. An adequate description would be a power-hungry, egotistical and arrogant man with a Napoleon complex. He moved slowly over the 3 years, making subtle reforms to benefit his clan and cement the Uchiha rule over Konoha. The power went to his head and Kushina hated the man for how he treated Makoto, as a possession rather than a wife. After Hiruzen revealed the body of Obito Uchiha and the note from Minato, the council deliberated for days on who the next Hokage would be. Eventually, Danzo backed off and threw in his support for Fugaku, which tilted the results in his favor. The Fire Daimyo, a fat man by the name of Kishi, approved Fugaku as the Godime Hokage and contributed extra funds to rebuild the village. The destruction was bad, but it would have been worse without Minato's sacrifice. The village lost 1/4 of its shinobi forces during the Kyuubi attack and 1/3 of the village was totaled. The village hailed Minato as a hero while they remained wistfully ignorant of his wife and heir. Now, after Naruto's 3rd birthday, Fugaku was forcing Kushina back into active service. He said that she had enough time and that Kushina would be allowed to select a nanny to raise Naruto. He said that the village needed her services as its sole remaining S-ranked ninja. It didn't help that he denied her the Namikaze fortune, which was hers by right of marriage. The daimyo conceded to Fugaku and said that the fortunes would be held by an accountant of the daimyo until such a time that Naruto would be strong enough to claim the Namikaze name. It took all of her friends to hold her down and keep Fugaku's head from rolling. Since she didn't have the Namikaze accounts, she had used the remainder of the Uzumaki fortune to sustain her and Naruto for the past 3 years. Now, those accounts were dwindling, and she would need to take missions again to provide for her Sochi. Kushina finished donning her uniform and peeked into Naruto's room. The blonde toddler was wrapped snugly in his sheets with a peaceful smile on his face. That smile is what she would fight for. That smile is what she would die for. Looking at him reminded her of the contract that she found in her robes once she left the hospital. She had looked it over in disbelief and cursed Minato for making a deal with a demon like the Kyuubi. She had tried to contact the Kyuubi, but she was unable to reach it thus far. She pushed those troublesome thoughts away and walked to her Sochi's bedside. She smiled before placing a tender kiss on Naruto's forehead before setting out for the day. After leaving Naruto's room, she went to the front door to meet the nanny that she handpicked to look after Naruto while she was away. She welcomed Tsubaki Sarutobi, Hiruzen's niece, to the compound and showed her around. The Uzumaki compound was a humble dwelling that resided next to the vacant Senju compound. It had a small training ground behind the 2-story house and an expansive garden. Naruto and Kushina loved spending time tending to their garden as mother and son, which resulted in an ever-expanding garden that nearly filled the backyard. Tsubaki took in the compound and knew that she would enjoy raising this child here. Her uncle had told her about Naruto's true lineage, in defiance of the council, and she wanted to help repay Minato for his sacrifice. Months passed without incident and the little blonde ball of sunshine grew to love Tsubaki and she him. She taught him how to read and write, lessons that were supplemented by Kushina when she was home. The child seemed to enjoy reading and he had a natural knack for the sealing arts, which Kushina started him on once he was able to read proficiently. Tsubaki noticed that Kushina was awfully cautious of taking Naruto outside, but after taking care of Naruto for a couple of months, Tsubaki decided to take him to the playground. Naruto bounced in excitement as they headed to the playground that bordered the clan compounds. It was a common meeting place for most shinobi clan families, and it had a happy atmosphere filled with the laughs and excited screams of children. When Naruto was 3.5 years old, he started visiting the playground regularly with Tsubaki. His outgoing nature made making friends easy and he already made friends with Itachi Uchiha, a girl 2 years older than him, and Shikamaru Nara, heir to the Nara clan. Those three were different from the normal clan children and they would usually play amongst themselves. Unknown to Tsubaki, Naruto or Kushina, one day a Hyuga guard was watching over the Hyuga heiress and her sister, and he turned on his Byakugan to make sure the children were safe. With his Byakugan active, the guard noticed a prominent seal on Naruto's stomach as he was roughhousing with Itachi. The guard decided to notify his clan head about it and he continued to watch the children. A month after that day, Naruto and Kushina were called into the Hokage's office. Kushina walked rigidly into the office with Naruto's hand held firmly in hers. With a straight and emotionless face, she addressed the Hokage. Hokage-sama, you summoned us. Fugaku looked up from his stack of papers and made a gesture with his hand. The Uchihas in the room and the hidden Anbu left the room so that Fugaku could talk privately with Kushina. Or so Kushina thought. Hiyashi Hyuga entered the room immediately after the guards left and now Kushina was on guard. Kushina, Care to explain why the Hyuga had to inform me of an intricate seal that resides on your son's stomach? Fugaku's voice was deadly serious and carried a hidden threat with it. What are you talking about, Hokage-sama? I have never seen a seal on my Sochi. Kushina shot back without hesitation. Even the trained Hyuga couldn't detect the lie she told. Fugaku looked at Hiashi and addressed him. Hiashi, can you please activate Yubaya-Kugan to tell me if Naruto has a seal on his stomach? Hiashi complied with an apologetic look to Kushina. Hokage-sama, there is an intricate seal on Naruto's stomach. It is pretty subdued and would not be found unless you were specifically looking for it. Hiashi added the last part to provide cover for his wife's friend. HNN, Fugaku said as he placed his head on his folded hands and looked at Kushina. Kushina, can you please recount the night of the Kyuubi attack for me? Don't worry about your son, I have placed him in a genjutsu. Kushina looked down with concern at Naruto before glaring at Fugaku. Look, Hokage-sama, she growled out. I have told you repeatedly. I was unconscious for most of it, but Minato woke me up for a little bit to say goodbye. He sacrificed his soul to send the Kyuubi back to the demon realm. Then, why does your son have whisker marks? Why does your nearly 4-year-old son look like a 7 or 8-year-old? I think you are lying to me, Kushina. I think Minato sealed the Kyuubi into the boy and you are trying to protect him. Why would you lie to me, Kushina? Kushina blanched when Fugaku called her out on it. I didn't know. I thought that Minato banished the demon. Fugaku decided to make his claim. Well, the boy is clearly our Jinchuriki. Now that I examine it closely, I can see trace amounts of the demonic chakra. The boy will need to be trained to be our weapon. I will elect an Uchiha to conduct the boy's training. Kushina's trepidation vanished and was replaced with motherly fury. Over my dead body, she growled out. If he is the Jinchuriki, I will train him when the time is right. There is nobody better and you know it. Furthermore, I will not allow you to steal my son's childhood from him. I will examine the seal and if he is the Jinchuriki, I will make sure that the seal is safe. When I decide the time is right, I will begin his training. And if you call my son a weapon again, Hokage or not, I will rip your still beating heart out, pull the thick studded rod out of your, shove your heart in your for some flavoring and then shove it down your fucking throat. Fugaku paled at the elaborate threat. If it came from any other woman, he would easily brush it off. He also knew that he couldn't simply rip and child, a clan heir at that, from his mother without major backlash from the Ninja Council. He decided to concede for now and he would seek counsel from his advisors. Very well, Kushina. You may go for now. Know that this issue is yet settled. Kushina turned on her heel and stormed out of the office. The Kyuubi watched the whole interaction and knew that the boy was in for tough times ahead. She may have to make contact with him earlier than expected. Kushina broke the genjutsu on Naruto and took him to her favorite ramen stand, the Ichiraku ramen stand. She calmed down when those immaculate blue orbs met her violet eyes. She decided to let him enjoy his childhood and she would shoulder this burden. She ordered him a couple bowls and watched her innocent child enjoy the food of the gods. She decided she would need to talk to Kakashi, Anko, Yugao and Kurenai. She would need her loyal students to help her keep watch over her son. After Kushina departed, Fugaku called Danzo and Homura into the room. He didn't want to include Hiruzen and Kaharu in this because they would undoubtedly protect the boy. I have called you both here today to inform you that I recently learned that Naruto Uzumaki is the container of the Kyuubi. Kushina claimed ignorance and I have no proof that she is lying. She refused to have the boy taught by anybody other than herself. You both know that this is a delicate issue, and the Ninja Council would not support us if we moved against Kushina and the child. In fact, it would cause massive issues. So, my counselors, tell me how you would acquire the weapon. Danzo's eyes widened at the prospect of such a thing while Homura just looked shocked. Danzo spoke first. Well, Hokage-sama, I would say that we need to remove the mother from the equation. The boy would need to be broken so that we could rebuild him from the ground up into the perfect weapon. Homura remained silent. He was on Fugaku's side, but the thought of killing one of the last loyal Uzumaki and the most powerful kunoichi in Konoha didn't sit well with him. I would play it patiently. Sneak influencers into the child's life that could eventually draw the child in with the promise of training. I caution against overt action due to the power of Kushina Uzumaki and the relationships she holds amongst the clans. Fugaku considered the two proposals. I believe Danzo's suggestion is a little rough, but it has the higher chance of success. Leave me and come up with well thought out proposals. We will meet again next week. Both elders nodded and left the office. This conversation would lead to the great unraveling of Konoha and the end of the Uzumaki clan, in Konoha at least. A couple days before Naruto's 4th birthday, Kushina was called out of the village on a 2-week S-ranked mission. Tsubaki was watching over him after his birthday party with some of the clan children. Enko and Yugao had stopped by to give Naruto presents in person and to fulfill their duty to their sensei. Everything seemed to be going perfectly during the party and they watched on with smiles as the children played in the backyard. Eventually, everybody left, and peace filled the Uzumaki compound. That was until Tsubaki was awoken at midnight to somebody at the gate. She opened the gate to a blank mask that held 2 Sharingan eyes. Before she could react, she was put under a strong genjutsu, and she brought the sleepy Naruto out to meet the masked man. The boy was confused, but he listened to Tsubaki and went with the man. The ninja needed Tsubaki to bring the child out due to the barrier that protected the Uzumaki compound. The masked man walked Naruto into the red light district and left the kid for dead. His orders stated that he would only intervene if it looked like the mob would kill him. The mob was incited by Danzo's agents that recently spread rumors that Naruto was the Kyuubi. They told the people that the demon had taken over Kushina's son and the drunk villagers were more than willing to find a scapegoat on this day. The boy's screams echoed across the red light district until the early morning. The white masked Anbu scraped the boy off the pavement once the mob had its fun and delivered him to the hospital for treatment. This marked the beginning of the ostracization of Naruto. Kushina flew into a rage when she returned to the village to find Tsubaki dead at her compound gates. When she broke through the hospital doors, threatened the nursing staff, got taken to Naruto and saw all of Naruto's injuries, she nearly destroyed the hospital. Kushina stayed by Naruto's bedside for the remainder of his stay in the hospital. After Naruto was dismissed from the hospital 3 days later, Kushina broke down the door to Fugaku's office and fought off the Anbu squad, leaving them in unconscious heaps on the floor. She then turned her visage of fury with the ethereal outline of the Shinigami hovering behind her onto Fugaku. Look here, Fugaku, I know you had something to do with this. You and the Hyuga were the only ones that knew. Fugaku stood up in a challenging pose. Careful, Kushina, that is treason you are spouting. I did not organize this, and I am affronted that you would accuse me of such a thing. I held love for you and the boy's father. It was my duty to inform the civilian council and it seems that the civilians did not take well to the news. He said the last part as if it was simply fact and it didn't matter. Kushina's hair flared into 9-tail-like braids, and she grabbed Fugaku by the collar and looked straight into his cursed Sharingan eyes. You will bring me those responsible. I will be allowed my retribution. If something like this happens again, I will hold you personally accountable. She flung him back into his chair and stormed out of the office. Fugaku needed a minute to recover from the killing intent, that he was just subjected to. She was truly a fearsome woman after all. After recovering, he smirked because phase 1 of his plan was going perfectly. Woo, she is truly a scary woman. Be careful on how you deal with her, master. Fugaku looked down at the black addition to his body. It was 2 years ago that this creature approached him with the plan created by Madara Uchiha. He wouldn't have believed it if the creature didn't take him to Madara's hidden base. He met the legend himself and was given an overview of the plan. It was this plan that would ensure Uchiha dominance of the elemental nations and Uchiha supremacy in the village that they founded. Indeed, she is, Zetsu. I will play this close to the chest. She is the only remaining obstacle to getting our hands on the Kyuubi. According to Madara's plan, once you have the Kyuubi in your possession you will receive his Rinnegan eyes. Zetsu, how is Madara-sama doing and why will he not give me the Rinnegan already? Master Madara is dependent upon the Gedo Mazo to sustain himself. Removing the Rinnegan now would kill him, and he wishes to see if you are a worthy successor. Would you entrust the eyes of a god to somebody that has yet to prove themselves to you? Well, do let me know if his condition changes. It is only a matter of time until the Kyuubi is under my control. Psychotic Uchiha and evil mass of hatred aside, the rest of that year was tough on young Naruto. Naruto was no longer welcome in the parks and the kids would shun him if he asked to play with them. Naruto tried to maintain his optimistic nature, but he failed as the rejections continued. Over the year, Naruto receded into himself and spent most of his time reading, studying and training. Kushina had given him a training regimen to hopefully prepare him for what was to come and distract him from his darker thoughts. However, she was dealing with the limitations of a 4-year-old child, even if that child looked to be nearly 8 years old. He was simply being taught the basics, but he did manage to unlock his chakra and begin rudimentary training. Naruto stopped going to the park when groups of bullies would form and start picking on him whenever Itachi and Shikamaru weren't present. Naruto would try to leave. His new caretaker, an old woman named Chie, barely protected the boy and she never taught him anything. Kushina tried to find other nannies, but nobody would accept the duty. It was as if somebody were threatening them if they accepted the position. Chie was the only one that accepted the position and Kushina was forced to take her by the council after abstaining from missions for a full month. She knew it was the worst thing possible, but she was being forced into S-ranked mission after S-ranked mission. Kushina sought the help of her friends, but the council soon caught on to them and would dispatch them on back-to-back missions as well. The end result of the year was a young boy that was terrified to walk in his own village. The glares and stares of the villagers haunted his nightmares. The beatings from children and thrown bottles from adults made Naruto into a recluse. Unfortunately for Naruto, Chie would drag him out of the compound for playtime, which resulted in Naruto getting abused in some way or another. Kushina raged at the woman, but Chie was protected by the council, and Kushina decided that she needed to find a way out of this toxic situation. Naruto no longer had a childhood, and it was only a matter of time before things spilled over. Kushina was enraged. She was on another S-ranked mission with some Uchiha teammate and Kakashi. They were on the border of the Land of Fire completing yet another mission that deliberately dragged her away from Konoha. She knew that her son's birthday was in 2 days, and she wanted to hurry up and complete this stupid mission so that she could make it back and protect her son. They were approaching the target destination when they were surrounded by 20 ninjas in black cloaks and blank white masks. Kushina locked eyes with Kakashi and both of them didn't wait for further introductions, they simply attacked the numerically superior force. Ida Uchiha was assigned to this group to observe and confirm the death of Kushina Uzumaki. Fugaku said that Kakashi would need to live to make the story believable and this would be a test of his loyalty. He simply engaged in a mock fight with the masked shinobi and observed. Unfortunately, Kushina was a force of nature. In the first 5 minutes of the fight, she killed 10 root shinobi. Kakashi had killed 4, so there were 5 root shinobi engaging them and the one that was tying up Ida. Kushina was covered in blood with only a minor slash on her left shoulder blade to show for it. She finished off her 3 remaining opponents and watched as Kakashi severed the head of his final opponent. The two then turned to watch the fight between Ida and the root shinobi that had lasted the whole time. With the briefest of eye contact, the two blurred off and knocked out Ida and the remaining root. Kakashi, this is undeniably Danzo and Fugaku. You know that I was not supposed to survive this mission. I am going to alter their memories and you will initiate Itsueri no Shi. I will go to Tanzaku Gai to meet up with Tsunade, bring him there. Kakashi nodded, and his visible eye that seemed to hold the grief of 1,000 losses. I will see it done, Kushina-sama. Know that I love you and I will always be loyal to you. You are the mother I never had, and I am going to miss you. Tears started falling freely from his eyes and stained his mask with their sorrowful moisture. Kushina pulled Kakashi into a motherly embrace and whispered, Kakashi, find yourself a good girl. Do that for your Ka-chan. I will stay in touch once we get settled. Kushina broke the hug and pulled the sealing scroll off of her back and went to work. Memory modification seals were horribly painful things and they required absolute perfection when crafting the seals. Kushina worked with the grace of a Fuinjutsu master as she created 3 seals. When she completed and double-checked her work, she used a kunai to cut the seals out of her scroll. She then proceeded to cut Ida a couple times and stabbed his right Sharingan eye. She did worse to the root ninja but left him alive and crippled. She then applied the memory modification seals to the unconscious ninjas before she turned to Kakashi. Okay, Kakashi, once Anko has delivered Naruto to Tanzakugai, you will need to apply this seal to the base of your neck. Once you receive my next letter, it will contain a counter seal to undo the effects. I do this because I have no doubt that a Yamanaka will perform a memory dive on you to confirm my death since there will be no body. Kakashi nodded sadly at the thought. I love you, Kakashi-chan. I am so happy that Minato was able to adopt you into our family, even if the damned council won't acknowledge it. Kakashi was a sobbing mess, and he buried his head into Kushina's shoulder. He had lost everyone he ever loved. Minato, Rin, Obito, even though he turned traitor, and now Kushina. I don't know if I can hold on without you, Ka-chan. Tears flowed freely as the bloody Kushina embraced the 20-year-old Kakashi. Kushina rubbed his back and cooed at him like his real mother. You are strong, Kakashi-chan. I believe in you. When Naruto is old enough, we will exact our revenge on that cursed village and I will come for you. Kakashi let out every tear that his ducts could manufacture before breaking the embrace. He nodded to Kushina and took the stasis scroll that Ida was sealed in. Sadly, the scroll was saving this cursed man's life, but it was needed to sell the story. Kushina departed for Tanzakugai to meet up with Tsunade and update her on the whole situation. Kakashi pocketed the scroll and kicked the incapacitated root ninja for good measure before leaving the clearing. Kakashi raced back to Konoha to complete his part of the mission. The night of the Kyuubi festival, Kakashi made it back to Konoha and snuck in via an old Anbu route. He went to Anko's house to initiate Project Itsueri no Shi, and she was more than happy that the time had finally come. Life for Anko had been miserable in Konoha. After her return as a 10-year-old from Orochimaru's lab, she had been treated as a persona non grata in the Hidden Leaf Village. Her only saving grace was being put on Kushina's team before the Kyuubi attack. Those 2 years were the best years of her life. A now 15-year-old Anko hopped up and adorned her sneakiest outfit, a far departure from her trench coat and fishnet armor. Kakashi blurred off to find Naruto while Anko went to the Uzumaki compound to gather up the extraction scrolls that Kushina provided. Anko ran into Chia when she showed up at the compound. She threw a senbon laced with a slow-acting neurotoxin into the pathetic woman's neck. She wished she could stay and play with her, but more important things needed to get done. Anko knew that her former village would declare her a missing ninja after today, but she could give a less. She simply said goodbye to her sensei's house and blurred off in a streak of black to join Kakashi. Kakashi used Pakken to find Naruto and when he did, he was enraged. A mob had chased the boy out on a training ground and was in the process of pinning him down. A moment later, Anko linked up with Kakashi and a furious visage appeared on her face. After a moment to settle down, a wicked grin adorned her face as she made eye contact with Kakashi. Kakashi and Anko blurred to first incapacitate the watchers before they dealt with the mob. 2 Uchiha Jonins were watching the event with disinterested looks on their faces. Their only role was to ensure the kid didn't die. That is why they were surprised when they were knocked unconscious by a poison senbon to their necks. If they did not receive treatment in the next hour, they would most likely die. Spoiler, they would not receive treatment in time since Anko always did love her custom poisons. After the watchers were incapacitated, Anko proceeded to slaughter the onlookers. Naruto watched on in a mix of horror and fascination as his honorary sister saved him from the mob. Kakashi took two civilians aside and put them under a powerful genjutsu. Kakashi made them believe that they actually killed Naruto, and then Anko flew into a rage and killed everyone. Anko was taking her time with two Chunin ninja that had joined the chase until Kakashi completed his memory modification. After Kakashi completed the genjutsu, he said his goodbyes to his little brother and Anko with tears falling from his lone visible eye. Anko scooped up Naruto and began stripping the child of his trademark orange jacket. She gave Kakashi the bloodied clothes and wrapped Naruto in a blanket that Kushina provided. The blanket eliminated all scents so that the only scent that could be tracked would be Anko's. That would be if Anko wasn't wearing an outfit that bore the same seals that her sensei crafted for this specific mission. Kushina sensei really was a genius when it came to the sealing arts. Kakashi pulled out a scroll that was prepared for this occasion. Kushina used an Uzumaki ritual to create a blood clone of Naruto. Kakashi put a stabilizing seal on the blood clone's body before he killed the Naruto clone and proceeded to make it look like the work of the mob. This was the most difficult and emotionally tortuous task that Kakashi ever willingly completed. He kept the thought of his adoptive mother and the safety of his little brother on the forefront of his mind to get through the bloody task. Kakashi took the body and dumped it into the lake that occupied the southern edge of this training ground. Once his job was completed, Kakashi snuck out of the village so that he could seal his memories and report in the next day. Flashback: 4 months ago in the Uzumaki compound. Kushina had called a meeting of her students to discuss her plans for the future. She never thought that she would willingly leave Konoha, but things had gotten that bad. It simultaneously broke her heart and filled her with rage when she thought about her husband sacrificing himself to save this accursed village. She would miss her friends, but for the Uzumaki woman it was simple. Family before all. Her students showed up in the dead of night to meet with their sensei. They had struggled to organize this meeting due to the insane workload that they were forced to complete. Eventually, they were able to find a single night to link up and enjoy each other's company. Each student walked into the room and hugged their former sensei before taking a bottle of sake apiece and sitting down for the discussion. Kushina led the conversation. "Thank you all for coming. I never thought I would be in the situation where I would ask you to betray Konoha, but I am asking you. What they have done to my Sochi is unforgivable, and it is only a matter of time before Fugaku find a mission difficult enough to kill me." Anko stepped in. Her normally playful tone was completely absent. "Sensei, you are essentially my mother. You were the one who saved me after the snake left me for dead. I hold no love in my heart for this village, and you need only ask. I will do anything for you." Kakashi rubbed the back of his neck and I smiled at Kushina. "Well, I will admit that I still hold love for Konoha, but that won't stop me from helping you. You are my mother in all, but blood, and I can no longer stand by as this village destroys my little brother." Yugao straightened up in her seat. "Sensei, I am the same as Kakashi. I will help you, but I do not think that I could raise my blade against my fellow Konoha ninja." Yugao's tone sounded repentant for this small fact. "It's okay, Yugao-chan. I would never ask you to do such a thing. I only ask for your assistance watching over Naruto-kun and maybe a blind eye here or there." Yugao nodded at that before Kurenai spoke up. "Sensei, has it really come to that?" "Yes, Kurenai-chan, it has come to that. This village denied my marriage to Minato. This village is trying to forcefully separate me from my son. This village has turned my vibrant ball of sunshine into a scared child, and this village is most definitely trying to kill me. If I do not die due to my mission load, they will make a direct move to remove me from the equation." All heads fell at that, and silence hovered over the room for a couple minutes. Anko tossed her saucer away in an elaborate motion before taking a swig out of her sake bottle. What you need is to do, sensei. Kushina smiled at Anko, her most loyal student and kindred spirit. Well, I have an idea. I know that they will force me out of the village on Naruto's birthday. If my guess is right, that frigid bitch Chia will just hand him over or force him out of the compound. We will fake his death and I will take him away from this accursed village. I will prepare extraction scrolls with everything we will need and I will show you all how to access them. Yugao reacted to this. Where will you go, sensei? Kushina smiled sadly at Yugao. If you are not coming with, it would be better if you didn't know. Yugao, Kurenai and Kakashi hung their heads at this. Don't worry, when the time is right, I will let you know. If you ever wish to leave this hellhole, all you need to do is ask. Kakashi smiled at that thought before asking. How will we fake his death, sensei? Uzumaki technique. I will create a blood clone. I will develop a seal that makes the body stay after the clone dies. It should hold up to an autopsy since it would fool every medical ninja that isn't on Tsunade's level. The group stayed to drink and spend the night with their sensei. They filled in gaps in the plan and each of her students would help ensure that Naruto was as protected as possible. End of flashback. Anko carried Naruto in her arms as she exited the passageway that led out of Konoha. She used every evasive maneuver she could think of to throw people off her trail. She had 2 shadow clones dress in her old clothes that would run until they ran out of chakra in opposite directions. She used minor applications of earth jutsu to cover her tracks as she made her was to Tanzaku Gai. She knew it wouldn't be too long until the mob and fake body of Naruto were discovered, but she was confident in the head start she had. Anko ran non-stop through the night and into the mid-afternoon to Tanzaku Gai. Naruto clung to her, rested his head on her chest and eventually Anko knew that he was asleep in her arms. Kushina was waiting for her on the edge of the city along with Tsunade and Shizune. The 2 medics had insisted on helping the Uzumaki family in their escape once Kushina told them about her plan. Tsunade firmed her resolve to never step foot in Konoha again, unless she were there to destroy it. It was clear to Tsunade that the will of fire was no longer the operating philosophy of Konoha. Kushina saw Anko pulling up on Tanzaku Gai and could tell that she was on the verge of collapse. In a blur of sun-kissed blonde hair, Kushina darted to Anko and wrapped her in a supportive hug. Yes, dear reader, Kushina had Tsunade chakra dye her hair to the same color as Naruto's. She did so that she wouldn't be as recognizable. Anko thanked her sensei and handed Naruto to Kushina before she passed out. Tsunade saw the signs of fatigue and demonstrated that she was still a Sannin when she was able to catch Anko before she hit the ground. Kushina took in the dried blood on Naruto and gasped in despair. Tsunade saw it also and nearly froze, but she pushed through the impulse and guided the group to her hotel suite. She was grateful that she hit 4 jackpots in a row and then cleared out a 5-card stud table 2 days ago. She knew that always meant something bad was about to happen to her or someone she loved and sure enough Kushina showed up the next day. Waiting for Naruto last night was the longest night Tsunade could remember as the agitated Kushina paced around the hotel suite, ranting about killing Fugaku slowly and slicing Danzo to bits. As the group entered the hotel suite, Shizune took Anko to her bed and laid the sleeping woman down, clothes and all. Naruto had woken up due to the noise of the town and jumped into his granny Tsunade's arms for the trip to the hotel. She threw the mostly Naruto into the hotel bath when they got back to the room. She couldn't get over the fact that her godson looked like a 9-year-old. The growth rate the child went through was insane and she couldn't remember any example from a medical text that explained what was occurring. Kushina told her that it was most likely due to the Kyuubi, so she figured she would just chat with the kid. Naruto-kun, how are you growing so fast, kiddo? The child chuckled mischievously. Well, Ba-chan, I don't really know. I think the pretty lady with red hair said it was because of her. Tsunade paled at this. She had caught up with Kushina and neither of them had told Naruto about the Kyuubi yet. Kushi-chan, I need your help with Naruto-kun. Kushina walked to the door of the bathroom and smiled down at the sight of her son grinning in the tub with Tsunade holding a sudsy scrub brush in her hand. Now, Naruto-kun, why don't you tell us about this pretty lady with red hair? Flashback. After Naruto was taken away from the mob, Naruto passed out in Anko's arms as his adrenaline crashed and the pain registered throughout his body. The boy woke up to raindrops on his face as he lay in a verdant clearing. Everything around Naruto was supersized and it was framed by the cloudy drizzle. The trees were hundreds of feet tall, the bushes were as big as houses, the flowers were taller than Naruto, and the lake next to the clearing looked like a small ocean to the young blonde. Naruto stood to his feet and enjoyed the soft tickles of the grass, the wet comfort of the water drops clinging to the blades of grass, and the sweet scent of nature that hung in the air. He felt drawn to a certain area and his feet carried him subconsciously over a massive hill that occupied his forward field of view. Eventually, Naruto made it atop the hill and looked down on a pretty little cottage that rested at the base of the hill and the edge of the massive lake. Naruto listened to the pull and walked down the hill to the cottage. As he got closer, he sensed something powerful, yet familiar, was in the cottage. With a gulp and affirming of his childish resolve, Naruto entered the quaint dwelling. Inside the cottage was not what Naruto was expecting. What should have been a small building opened up into a large living room joint with what seemed to be a kitchen. The living room had 2 love seats and a large couch that rested in front of a kind of television that Naruto had never seen before. It was flat, unlike most of the fat and clunky televisions he had seen in Konoha. The hallway continued to lead back into the house, but Naruto didn't care about that. All he could focus on was the melodious humming that accompanied a familiar, mouth-watering smell that was coming from the kitchen area. Kyuubi sensed his presence as soon as he entered the mindscape. She wanted to see how he would react to her domain, and she wanted the first meeting to be a good one. Even if she accelerated his growth, she knew that he still had the mentality of a child and he wouldn't be ready for a serious conversation. Instead, she chose to kick things off on the right foot with her container, potential mate. She made his favorite dish, chicken ramen. It was peculiar to Hikari that chicken would be his favorite meat, but she chalked it up to her yokai's influence on the child. Eventually, she was broken from her musings as she heard the child enter her kitchen, followed by a gasp. Hikari turned around and she would have giggled if it weren't for her image that she needed to uphold. Instead, she smiled regally down upon the small child that was gaping at her. She waited for the child to be broken out of his stupor, and she would have done it for him, except she became stunned when the child whispered, "So pretty." Of all the things Naruto could have said, that was probably one of the best openings a 5-year-old could pull off. Hikari put the back of her wrist over her mouth and chuckled. Her chuckle held such an alluring beauty that it further stunned Naruto. However, his face fell before he asked his first question. "Anyo, excuse me, are you Kami-sama? Does that mean I am dead?" Hikari went from flattered to aghast at the question. This didn't show on her face though, but she decided to see where Naruto wanted to go with this. "No, I am not Kami-sama, and no, you are not dead." "Why do you ask that, Naruto-kun?" "Well, everything outside was so pretty, prettier than Ka-chan's garden and prettier than Konoha's forest. I kinda thought it was heaven. And I thought I died because I was being chased and hurt by some mean people from my village again. I thought maybe I died this time." Hikari tried hard to hide her frown as she knew about the boy's torture by the hands of those filthy humans. She had watched his magnificent light dim over the past year, and it infuriated her. The only thing stopping her from destroying the wretched village was the contract she signed with the boy's father. She reached down and ruffled the sun-kissed blonde hair and gave the boy the reassurance he needed. "Naruto-kun, there is a lot you are not ready to hear or understand yet. I know you are a smart boy, so I will tell you this. We are inside you, Naruto, inside the seal on your tummy. Do you know what I am, Naruto?" The boy pouted for a bit before he paused and looked at the beautiful lady. She had orange and black fox ears that rested atop her head and 9 reddish-orange tails swished around behind her red yukata. The tails swayed in a mesmerizing pattern that nearly distracted Naruto by their rhythmic beauty. He was smart, for a child, and he finally put 2 and 2 together. Miss, are you the Kyuubi? He broke eye contact and looked at the ground as he said this. Hikari cocked an eyebrow at the boy, crossed her arms and looked down on him. And what if I were? Naruto balled his fists in a nervous fashion over his stomach before he looked up and answered. Well, I guess I would want to know why you attacked my village. The villagers say it was me that did it but I was just a baby. Hikari smiled down on him and placed a comforting hand on his cheek and rubbed his whisker marks with her thumb. Naruto-kun, you did not attack the village. I did, but it is a long story. One you should ask your mother for. Let's just say that somebody made me do it for now. Oh okay. You know, Kyuubi, you don't seem that mean to me. You are nice and I feel safe with you. Hikari nearly swooned at the cuteness. That was a glimpse of the boy, a glimpse of the light that had dimmed over the past year. Well, thank you, Naruto-kun. You and I have been together for a long time, so you probably recognized my chakra. Now, let's eat some ramen before I send you back to your mother. Naruto's contemplative look turned into the radiant face of an exuberant child. Naruto hopped up on the bar stool for the island that separated the kitchen from the living room. He ate the chicken ramen with gusto while Kyuubi just watched on with a smile. This was a good first impression, but she knew there were many difficult conversations to come. Conversations that a child would not be ready for. Flashback end. Kushina, Tsunade and Shizune stood in the bathroom, stunned, with looks of confusion and slight panic on their faces. Tsunade had long since dropped the sponge and was gawking at Naruto. Kushina was concerned about how she would handle the questions Naruto was bound to ask. She clenched her teeth and said it. Those Konoha bastards could no longer control her life. Okay, Sochi, it seems like we have a lot to talk about. Why don't you get cleaned up and we will talk over a bowl of ramen? Naruto nodded vigorously and resumed washing himself. The blood collected near the drain and the sun-kissed blonde hair made its vibrant appearance again. The smiling, whisker-marked face of everyone's favorite blonde looked fully healed and replenished after his bath. Kushina gave him a white t-shirt with a red Uzumaki swirl and a pair of blue athletic shorts to change into. Eventually, the group was sitting at the table in the kitchenette of the hotel suite and Kushina forced herself to proceed with the discussion. Okay, Sochi, there are some things that mommy needs to tell you. Naruto was sitting in Tsunade's lap and Kushina took his hands in hers. As you said, you met the Kyuubi. It is because of the Kyuubi's chakra that you grow so fast, and yes, she is in a seal on your belly. Naruto cut her off here. It was so pretty in there, Ka-chan. It was like our garden except times 1,000, no a million. Naruto's excited tone elicited chuckles from the ladies before Kushina continued. That sounds lovely, Naruto-kun. Well, moving on, the Kyuubi used to be in a seal on my tummy. When I gave birth to you, a bad man showed up. That man threatened you and he took the Kyuubi out of me. He then made the Kyuubi attack our village. Your father, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, fought the Kyuubi and then made a deal with her. He sacrificed his life to seal her into you, Sochi. In return, she will make you strong and you will protect her. Does that make sense, Sochi? Tsunade, Shizune and Kushina observed the child process the information. They all knew the revelation about his father would confuse him, and sure enough it did. The boy's face contorted into confusion and sadness with a tinge of anger. Ka-chan, why are you telling me about Tu-san now? If my Tu-san was the Yondaime, why did the villagers do all that mean stuff to me? Why couldn't we tell them that he was my Tu-san? Kushina offered a pitiful smile in response before squeezing his hands to draw his beautiful azure eyes back up into her. Well, Sochi, let's just say that the village leaders were bad people. They wanted to use you and the Kyuubi for something that I didn't want. That is why we left, and since we are not going back, I thought I could tell you now. Naruto frowned at this. It didn't make much sense to him, but he always did trust his mother. Okay, Ka-chan. You will have to tell me about Two-san later. So, what do we do now? Tsunade looked at Kushina before she answered. She nestled her chin on Naruto's spiky blonde locks as she spoke. Your mommy is going to find you a new home while you stay with me, Shizune and Anko. Naruto looked to his mother for confirmation before she nodded. Yes, Sochi, I am going to find us someplace safe to stay that will be nice to you. The boy perked up and that is rapidly asked his next question. Will Tsunade Ba-chan and Shizune Ne-chan be coming with us? Tsunade spoke softly. Probably not, Naruto-kun. I will come and visit you though. It would cause a lot of problems for you and your mother if I lived with you. Do you understand? Naruto frowned at this. But Ba-chan, family comes before all, and you are family. Tsunade's heart swelled at that, and a radiant smile adorned her face. Well, Naruto-kun, maybe when it is safer, I will come and live with you. Before then, I will try to visit as often as I can, okay? Promise. Naruto said this as he held a pinky finger up over his head. Tsunade locked his tiny pinky in hers and whispered that she promised. Shizune took in the whole scene and smiled down on Naruto. She may only be 15, but this child was too cute. She also appreciated that her master seemed to be happier in his presence. That's right, Naruto-kun, you will have to get bigger and stronger every time we see you. Naruto nodded his head enthusiastically at this. The group would finish their dinner and spend the next couple days in each other's company, catching up and just enjoying the fact that they were all safe, for the time being. Fugaku was having a terrible day and he was afraid it was about to get worse. First, he finds a bunch of dead civilians, 2 Chunin and the 2 Uchihas he had watching the boy, all dead. Then, one of the teams he sent to investigate the scene reports in that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is dead as well. His body was beaten and broken with a kami-damned kitchen knife run through his heart. To make matters worse, he was waterlogged, and the autopsy showed that he was dead with no sign of the Kyuubi. For all he knew, the Kyuubi could show up at any moment and lay waste to his village. Zetsu had told him it would take years for the Kyuubi to reform, but that just seemed to put an ominous timer on the village's destruction. Fugaku was informed that Kakashi Hatake had reported in alone, carrying a stasis scroll for one of his injured companions. He was receiving some urgent treatment in the hospital before he would report in. This left Fugaku time to muse on the possible success or failure of Kushina's assassination. A task that Fugaku knew could backfire in the worst way possible. Unfortunately for Fugaku, it took Kakashi 3 hours to finally report in. Hokage-sama, I apologize for the delay. My wounds made it difficult for me to return. Fugaku waved him off before requesting a full mission report. Kakashi nodded and continued. Ida, Kushina-sensei and I were en route to the mission when we were attacked by 20 or so ninjas in black cloaks and blank masks. We engaged and Kushina-sensei was able to kill most of them before she was stabbed through her back and stomach. In her last act of bravery, she used some jutsu to explode and took out the remaining 5 ninjas she was fighting. Ida and myself fought the remainder and I was able to kill the rest before succumbing to my injuries. I woke up to find a heavily injured Ida and a massive crater on the battleground. I put Ida in a stasis scroll to preserve his life and left my mission incomplete. I deemed it more important to report this to you than to complete the mission because it wasn't time sensitive. Fugaku gritted his teeth throughout the report, but he found peace in knowing that Kushina was dead. Was there anything left of Kushina's body? No, Hokage-sama. I found and recovered her sword. I planned on giving it to Naruto. Kakashi, that will no longer be possible. Kakashi bristled at that bit of information and a look of cold fury occupied his lone visible eye. Last night, a mob of villagers killed Naruto before an unknown ninja killed the whole mob. Naruto's body is in the morgue now and the autopsy already confirmed it. Kakashi fell to his knees and wept for his dead mother and little brother figures. Fugaku allowed it since he wasn't a complete and total bastard yet. Okay, maybe he was, but he needed one of the strongest ninjas remaining in his village on his side. Go home and rest, Kakashi. I will expect a written report in the next 3 days. I will most likely call you for testimony before the council in that time. 2 days later, Konoha's council was called to provide an update on the situation. Danzo had informed Fugaku that one of his agents made it back to Root headquarters heavily injured and corroborated Kakashi's story. Ida, who was recovering in the hospital after losing his left eye and right arm, did as well. Now, Fugaku needed to address the council. Thank you everybody for responding to my call. I have called you here today to inform you of the death of Kushina Uzumaki and Naruto Uzumaki. The ninja heads jumped to their feet in an uproar while the civilian council cheered. Eventually, Fugaku restored order to the chamber and gave the official story of the events, which earned more outrage. The civilian council was appalled that so many civilians died during their valiant quest to rid the village of the demon. The shinobi council wondered who killed so many people and 4 ninjas. Hiyashi stood and asked the question. Hokage-sama, who could possibly have killed that many people and escaped from the village? Fugaku answered in a monotone. Well, during our reports it appears as if the Uzumaki compound has been locked down by seals. In addition, Enko Mitarashi as Mia and Anbu found a note stuck to her front door with a kunai. She said she killed all of them to avenge her sensei's son. Tracker squads have been dispatched to locate her and I have added her into our bingo book as a B rank bounty. Inoichi chuckled at that. B rank? You think that is enough? I will tell you that girl has enormous potential, and she became a monster under Kushina's instruction. It should probably be higher. Some random civilian stood up at that. There is no way the snake whore is that strong. She finally betrayed the village, as we all knew she would. The man was cut off by enormous killing intent coming from Sume Inuzuka and Makoto Uchiha, who was acting clan head until Itachi or Sasuke came of age. It was Sume that growled her threat at the man. Well, maybe if you moronic civilians didn't kill the son of her sensei, she wouldn't have done that. Did you ever think of that? Mibuki Haruno, a pink-haired banshee of a counselor, screeched out. I can't believe you would blame us, Sume. That boy was the Kyuubi incarnate. Those civilians are heroes. Makoto was caught by Fugaku a few inches before she could tear the pink banshee's heart out. That didn't stop her from terrifying every civilian to their core. You evil, manipulative bitch. He was a boy, a mere child. Anyone who spent 2 minutes with him could have seen that. And you people killed him. Fugaku was now struggling to contain his wife. It had been years since he saw her act out in such a way and it filled him with a strange mix of fear and respect. Then he was stunned as he saw the Mangekyo Sharingan spinning in his wife's eyes. Yes, he thought, she did come from good stock. I will need some more children out of her. He signaled Anbu to help him restrain her. Calm down, Makoto-chan, calm down. Those responsible are already dead. The 2 survivors have already been interrogated by Ibiki and Inoichi. Makoto's head snapped to her husband. You will bring me those 2. They will die by my blade. I will not stand for them to remain alive. The civilians protested this, but the unanimous vote of the Ninja Council and the elders made it crystal clear that they would be sentenced to death. The remainder of the council meeting was an unproductive mix of shouting and arguing that left every counselor with a headache. They were all concerned about the impending doom of the Kyuubi and about the village's lack of a Jinchuriki. However, nothing more was decided that night. 2 weeks later, gates of Kumogakure no Sato. A beautiful blonde woman carrying twin blades on her hips approached the gates of Kumogakure. The gate guards halted her and were in the process of inspecting the woman. She didn't have any papers, which was suspicious. The blonde woman then spoke. Look, you two, could you please tell I that an old friend is here to cash a favor from the Third War? Once he meets me, he will understand. Without much further protest, The gate guard had a bold ninja, Kumo's version of Anbu, deliver the message to the rakeage. I was a beast of a man with milk chocolate skin, blonde hair done back in cornrows, and he constantly wore an open white coat. Ripped muscles filled the coat's opening and 3 golden weights adorned each wrist. It is a point of contestation how much each of his wrist weights actually weighs, but the rumors say somewhere between 100 and 500 pounds. I was making his way with his most trusted shinobi, Darui, to the front gates. He was wondering who would call on him from the third great shinobi war that couldn't just present papers. As he approached the gates, he caught the guards standing around a blonde woman with a wonderful figure and 2 swords strapped to her hip. As he got closer, he started to recognize her, but the hair threw him for a loop. It wasn't until he was standing right in front of her and he recognized her, Kushina Uzumaki. Before I could speak and blow her cover, Kushina spoke as she bowed to him. Raikage-sama, I am here to seek a private audience with you. It is important. Without further discussion, I dismissed his gate guards and walked silently with the woman back to his office. He greeted his people as he made his way back up the mountain while his brain worked at a mile a minute to figure out why Kushina was here. Eventually, the group made it back to his office where he dismissed everyone except Darui. He then set up a privacy seal and opened the conversation. Kushina, not that it isn't good to see you here, but what can I do for you? And what's with the blonde hair? And why all the secrecy? Kushina smiled at a beautiful smile that made the man gulp. It is good to see you again. Much has happened and I will tell you all. It was a long journey, is there any way I could get some tea? I nodded at Darui, who requested tea from I's fiery secretary, Karui, before closing the door. Kushina proceeded to tell I of all that happened since Minato died during the Kyuubi attack. Needless to say, I and Darui were a mix of stunned and enraged once Kushina finished catching them up. Karui entered midway into the conversation and Kushina pinged her chakra. It seemed like there was some Uzumaki blood in that fiery and foul-mouthed secretary. Through gritted teeth, I responded. I am sorry for all that. So, what is it that I can do for you? This was the crucial moment, she really needed this to work. How would you like the Uzumaki clan to join Kumogakure? If this is something you desire, I would like something in return, which will benefit us both in the future. Darui's mouth hung open in shock as I reeled at the suggestion. Why, Kushina, would you willingly come to a village that attempted to kidnap you once? Kushina waved off the concern. Shit happens and it was your father that ordered that. Minato and I always trusted you to be a decent man. He spoke fondly of your rivalry, which is why he didn't kill you and your brother after our battle. He knew you were the man that Kumo needed to get back on the right track. I was pleasantly surprised by the response. Indeed, the rivalry between him and Minato was a thing of legends. Okay, so, if I agree to this, what do I get and what would you need? Kushina took a deep breath before delivering the big news. Well, my Sochi is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. In addition to gaining the most powerful Biju, I would share some Uzumaki seals and techniques. I would join your forces and do everything I could to help Kumo prosper. I will guarantee my son's loyalty to Kumo and I will encourage him to propagate his bloodline here. I was now envisioning the armies of Kumo equipped with Uzumaki seals before visions of Kumo's future was filled with the descendants of the 2 most powerful ninjas he had ever known. Okay, Kushina, that sounds great, but what is it you want from me? I would like for you and Kumo to assist me in rebuilding Uzushiogakure. I would like you to help me find any scattered Uzumaki. Until we have rebuilt Uzushio, I would like the clan to reside here. Once Uzushio is built, my son will head the clan here while you have strategic positioning and allies in Uzu. I raised a massive hand to his chin as he thought it over. He would be harboring 2 or more fugitives from Konoha, big whoop, he could hide them from Konoha's spies. He would acquire a new Jinchuriki, something that may bring war to Kumo, but he would have 3 Jinchuriki to dissuade that. In return for basically building an outpost, he would gain a legendary clan and even some bloodline. That spurred Ai's next question. What bloodline does your son have? Kushina picked up the keen interest in Ai's tone, so she smirked before she answered. Tsunade's genetic test confirmed chakra chains, massively enhanced chakra capacity and rapid regeneration. While they are untrained, he has 3 chakra natures as well: wind, lightning and water. I smacked his lips at the prospect. He looked to Darui, who was equally impressed, and asked what he thought. Reikage-sama, I have water and lightning elemental affinities, which is why I have my storm release. If the child is everything Kushina-sama is saying, then he will become a monster. With the right training, he would be able to eclipse all of us. I turned to Kushina and hardened his eyes and set himself into professional mode. Very well, Kushina Uzumaki, I will accept you and your kin into Kumogakure. In return, I will aid you in resurrecting the Uzumaki. Kushina pulled out a scroll, carefully and slowly, and asked. Would you care to put it all down on an Uzumaki blood contract? I looked hesitant before he asked what the contract would do. An Uzumaki blood contract is unbreakable. In the event either party betrays the other, the contract will take the offending party's life. Let's say I betrayed Kumo in some way, the seal would activate, and I would die. Let's say you kill me and take my Sochi, the seal would activate, and you would die. The Uzumaki used this in their most serious treaties and agreements, and it protected the clan for centuries before we were betrayed. I looked at her seriously. So, you can't just activate the seal and kill me. I looked closely at her for any sign of deceit or malice. No, it does not work like that. We write out the contract, which links to our blood. Unless either of us breaks the contract, nothing will happen. I sighed. If he didn't trust this troublesome woman, he would never do such a thing. However, the potential gains for Kumo as a whole make it worth it. Very well. So, the contract between I, the Reikage of Kumo, and Kushina Uzumaki was signed. Kushina stayed in Kumo for a day before returning to Naruto and the rest of her family. She gave I the original contract and held onto a copy for herself. Tanzaku Gai, after Kushina left, Enko sighed as she played with her shiny blonde hair. It was the best way to throw pursuers off of her unique purple hair. She also put scent blocking seals on all of her clothes to prevent any of the Inuzukas from catching her scent. She sighed again as the troublesome blonde boy flew off the tree again. Too much chakra, Yaki. She laughed as the cute boy pouted at her. Enko nay, why is this so hard for me? Well, Yaki, you have more chakra than I do and you haven't really learned to control it yet. Shizune stifled her chuckle before she jumped in. She instructed the excitable boy to take a seat on the ground before she began. Okay, Naruto-kun, I know you are a smart boy, so let me explain. Chakra is the mix between physical, yang, energy and spiritual, yin, energy. In our bodies we can combine these two energies to produce chakra and mold it to enhance our bodies, like your ba-chan, or perform external jutsu. In our bodies, chakra is constantly flowing. It is like your blood and it has its own special pathways that lead from the top of your head, to the tips of your fingers, to the tips of your toes. Are you with me so far? At Naruto's nod, she continued. Well, in those special pathways are points called tenketsu. These tenketsu are where chakra mixes and takes shape. The bigger the tenketsu, the more powerful jutsu you can perform at once. Still with me? Another nod from the blonde whose serious gaze was digging into Shizune as if looking for the answers behind her eyes. Okay. Well, the special pathway, the chakra circulatory system, pulls chakra out of the primary chakra reservoir, your heart. This chakra flows at various rates and a couple of factors come into play. The bigger the chakra reserve, like yours, the faster the chakra flows. The faster chakra flows, the more difficult it becomes to mold. Especially since your tenketsu are still relatively small in comparison to your enormous reserves. Finally, chakra has different density. The more dense chakra is, the stronger the jutsu. However, denser chakra also makes it more difficult to mold. Naruto scratched his head in frustration. So, let me get this straight, I have super amounts of chakra, my chakra is super dense and it moves super fast, which all make it harder to mold. Is that right, Shizune Nekken? Shizune rubbed Naruto's spiky, blonde locks. Very good, Naruto-kun. Yes, that is correct. Naruto frowned at this. I am screwed. I will never be a great ninja because I have too much stinkin' chakra to mold, Datbeo. Anko tossed an empty dango stick at Naruto. No, Gaki, you have the potential to become one of the greatest ninjas ever. You will just have to work 100 times harder than any other Gaki to control your chakra. She is right, Naruto-kun. It will be difficult, but you have the most potential I have ever seen. Naruto hopped to his feet and gave each sister a hug. He thanked them before running over to the tree and giving it another go. Unfortunately, things are never that easy. He continued to progress, but it would be weeks before he was able to comfortably perform the tree walking exercise. During their breaks in training, Shizune or Tsunade would walk Naruto through Tanzaku-gai. When Tsunade was alone with Naruto, she would sneak him into the casino so that he could play with his ba-chan. The casinos couldn't believe the winning streak the legendary sucker went on. Tsunade paid off every debt in Tanzaku-gai before she pocketed enough money to secure a compound. She started at the slots with Naruto and then she would play Texas Hold'em, or 5-card stud. The gamblers around town tried to take advantage of her rotten luck until Tsunade cleaned them all out. It was even more embarrassing that a 5-year-old child was taunting them from her lap. The gambling spree lasted for 5 days before Shizune busted Tsunade for it. Shizune's anger was tempered when Tsunade told her that she had paid off her debts and got them a new home. Shizune squealed in happiness and gave full credit to her little brother for this, which earned an angry tick mark from Tsunade. Anko was just glad to get out of the hotel and move into an actual house. She knew that she would have to lay low in town that was so close to Konoha, but it still sucked that she missed out on all of the fun. Shizune would take Naruto around town to visit some of the food stalls and bookstores. She was glad that the kid enjoyed reading so much and she was happy to see the light return to his azure blue eyes over the past couple weeks. She had walked with Naruto to a particular corner where he had been spending some time near a girl playing a flute. Naruto let go of Shizune's hand and ran up to Tayuya and gave her some fresh takoyaki and a couple sticks of dango. She watched on as Naruto's infectious smile crept onto the redhead's face. After she finished eating, she played a truly enchanting song on her flute. The music drew a crowd that would toss a couple coins in the girl's hat. Shizune recognized that the music was laced with a genjutsu, but it was so serene that she decided not to break the genjutsu. Naruto was about to say goodbye to his new friend when he noticed that a couple older guys pulled her into an alley. He charged off to help his friend and it took Shizune a minute to realize he was gone. When Naruto entered the alley, his blood lit aflame in a fiery rage. There was one thug holding Tayuya's arms above her head and leering at her. Another thug was picking her pockets for the money she earned. The last guy was looking at Tayuya's flute before he snapped it in half. That seemed to break Tayuya's spurt, but it lit Naruto on fire. Before they knew what was happening, 3 chains, sparkling with electricity, stabbed through each thug. Their cries of pain filled the alley and they dropped Tayuya, who fell to her knees. Shizune sprinted into the alley and gasped at what she saw. 3 chains sprouted out of Naruto's back and they were impaling 3 men that were 15 feet away from the blonde. She knew immediately that one of the men was dead but 2 of them were twitching as they continued to be electrocuted. It was then she noticed the blue sparks of lightning chakra that danced along the chains and into the men's bodies. Naruto-kun, that is enough. You need to calm down, now. Shizune's strict tone reached Naruto through the haze of his anger. Naruto snapped back into his normal frame of mind and paled at what he had just done. Before he knew it, the chakra chains retreated back into his body and left him standing there, gaping. The men were crumpled heaps on the ground and each of them was now dead from either their wounds or the electricity. Shizune remained in a stunned silence until Naruto started crying and throwing up on the wall. Tayuya remained on her knees, her eyes fixed on the broken flute. The last remnant of her mother. Eventually, Shizune calmed Naruto down and performed a quick fire jutsu to get rid of the bodies. She didn't need people looking into her little brother for the murder of some common street thugs. She let Tayuya take the money off the dead thugs before offering to take her back to the hotel. Tayuya nodded her head and walked with them silently to the hotel. She would spend the next week or so with Naruto and company until Kushina returned. Nearly a month after her departure, and a week after Tayuya joined the gang, Kushina returned to Tanzakugai. She skillfully dodged the patrols of Konoha ninjas and had to take her time after she crossed back into Fire Country. She went to the hotel, where the woman at the desk informed her that Tsunade left a note for her. Tsunade's note guided her to a nice house on the northern edge of Tanzakugai. It was a humble two-story house with a small yard and a garden out front. Kushina heard the sound of her son's laughter accompanied by laughter that sounded like a young girl. She walked through the house and out onto the back porch where Tsunade was drinking sake while watching the kids train with Anko and Shizune. Care to explain how you could afford to move into a house, Tsunade? Tsunade turned around to see Kushina with her arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. Haha, well your brat gave me a lucky streak. I cleaned house for a couple days before I had enough to pay off my debts and I won this place off a poker game. Kushina's hair flared up and began to separate into 9 distinct tails. You took my Sochi into casinos so you could win some money. Tsunade stood up and held both her hand in a placating gesture. Now, Kushi-chan, he was safe with me the whole time. Kushina flew into a fit of motherly rage and laid a beating on Tsunade. Tsunade decided to just take her lumps and not resist. Thus, Naruto and Tayuya walked up to a Tsunade with multiple lumps protruding from the top of her head. Oh well, her debt's paid off, totally worth it. Ka-chan, why are you being mean to Ba-chan? Naruto's innocent tone shattered Kushina's rage into millions of pieces. Naruto-kun. Kushina darted over to Naruto and pulled him into a tight, yet loving, hug. Naruto was gasping for air before she let him go. She then noticed the cute little redhead that was next to her son. What's this, Sochi? Got yourself a girlfriend already? Tayuya blushed but the comment went right over Naruto's head. Yup. Ka-chan, this is Tayuya-chan. I saved her from some bad guys, and she is staying with us. Kushina linked eyes with Tsunade before turning to look at Tayuya. Well, Tayuya-chan, welcome. Can you tell me what happened to your parents? Tayuya looked down and tears brimmed in her eyes. My mama died and my daddy left me. Kushina pulled the girl into a motherly embrace. She got another familiar sense from the girl's chakra, so she decided to ask. Tayuya, what was your mother's name? The girl looked up through the gap in Kushina's bust and muffled out something incomprehensible. Kushina gave the girl a little space and gasped when Tayuya said, Tammy Uzumaki. Tsunade joined her in a stunned silence before Kushina scooped the girl into an overwhelming hug. Well, Tayuya-chan, I am Kushina Uzumaki, and this is my son Naruto. Your mom was my cousin and now you are part of my family. Tayuya cried into Kushina's chest while Naruto whooped in joy. Kushina took the kids out to eat to celebrate discovering a new family member. Kushina smiled brilliantly as she watched the two kids chat the night away and eat their meals. She looked to the sky and thanked Kami for this blessing. It seemed only good things happened since she left Konoha. That thought changed a little bit when Shizune recounted the story of Naruto saving Tayuya. Naruto was a wreck for a couple days, but Tayuya broke him out of his spell, and he has been better since. The group stayed in Tanzakugai for another week so that Kushina could spend time with Tsunade. Naruto and Tayuya were inseparable. Thus, Anko and Shizune would train the two in basic chakra control. Anko brought out dull kunais and got the kids started on proper handling of the ninja tools. During that week, Kushina took Naruto and Tayuya to a music store and Tayuya was able to choose a flute of her choice. Naruto paid for it with some of the money that Tsunade won and gave to him as his cut because he said he wanted to buy something nice for his sister. It was an adorable gesture that made Tayuya blush crimson and Kushina giggle mischievously. It was finally time for Kushina, Anko and the kids to say goodbye to Tsunade and Shizune. Truth be told, Tsunade really wanted to go with them, but they couldn't afford so much attention to be placed on the rogue group. Thus, Tsunade and Shizune waved goodbye to them from the porch of her new house. Kushina had acquired papers and passports from Ai that helped get them into a merchant caravan without much trouble. Kushina's name was changed to Shina Maki, Naruto became Ruto Maki, Anko became Shimanko Maki and Tayuya was just Tayuya. Kushina would get her proper papers when they got to Kumo. After seeing the chakra-dyed hair of Anko and Kushina, Tayuya insisted on having her hair dyed the same shade of sun-kissed blonde as Naruto. Thus, Kushina led her family of blondes in the caravan on the way to Kumo. The caravan was a slow-moving procession that took 3 weeks to get to the front gates of Kumo. Hiding among civilians was pretty boring for the kids, but that didn't stop Anko from playing chakra control games with Tayuya and Naruto. Eventually, every kid in the caravan migrated to the Uzumaki, or should I say Maki, family. Anko would toss ping-pong balls at the kids, and they had to catch them without using their hands. Anko brought multiple bags of ping-pong balls that she would lob at the kids. The civilian kids would trap them with their arms or other strategies that made them look like clapping seals. Naruto and Tayuya would try to channel chakra to whatever extremity Anko threw the ball at and keep that ball stuck to wherever it landed. Tayuya was much better at it than Naruto and she had a total of 11 ping-pong balls stuck all over her. Naruto only had 6 and they kept falling off as new ones were thrown at him. Each time, Naruto would get frustrated and either say something to rattle Tayuya or tickle her to make her drop them. This usually ended with Tayuya calling Naruto various names, but it seemed her favorite was shithead. Anko laughed as the girl rambled at her newfound brother and Naruto answered back with equal vigor. Anko couldn't remember the last time her heart was filled with so much joy. Maybe it was when Kushina-sensei removed the cursed seal when Anko was placed on her team. Yeah, back in the good old days on Kushina's team with Yugao and Kurenai. It seemed like so long ago. When the kids weren't playing games, they were reading basic books that would introduce them to ninja life. Seeing as they were Uzumakis, Kushina gave them Intro to Fuinjutsu by Mito Uzumaki, which Naruto was already familiar with. He had read it dozens of times in his childhood. Naruto would look over her shoulder from time to time to check on her progress or look up from his book, Chakra and Its Basic Components, by Tsunade Senju. When the kids got bored of reading, Kushina and Anko would tell them stories and give them basic instructions. Long caravan trip short, the kids used the trip to learn how to become better shinobi. Eventually, the caravan pulled up to the base of the mountain that housed Kumogakure. Naruto rode on Anko's shoulders and looked up with his jaw hanging low. The road wound in a circular pattern around the mountain, up and up it went into the clouds. The buildings were built into the mountainside and his mother told him that the whole mountain was used in some way. They followed the caravan up to the gates and the Uzumaki family waited patiently for their turn to enter. Eventually, Kushina flashed their papers and the permission slip from the rakeage to allow Tayuya entry. The Uzumaki family made its way up to the rakeage tower to introduce themselves to Ai and find out where they would be living for their fresh start in Kumo. Naruto and Tayuya took in the new landscape in awe, only barely registering that it was harder to breathe than they were used to. The winding path was filled with life and fun, but Anko was able to notice that this village was much more militaristic than Konoha. Shinobi-based buildings were everywhere and the civilian presence was greatly reduced. If the percentage of Konoha was 70% civilian and 30% shinobi, then the hidden cloud would be the inverse of that. Naruto waved to everyone who looked at him curiously, not caring that a majority of the people were dark-skinned. He found it awesome to meet people different than him, and his gigawatt smile earned smiles and waves in return. The people of Kumo looked at the family of sun-kissed blondes with curiosity, but the atmosphere seemed welcoming as well. The trip to the Raikage Tower took 20 minutes, and Tayuya was huffing and puffing by the time they made it all the way up, while Naruto was still bouncing around in excitement. They stopped at the desk outside of the Raikage's office and saw the pretty secretary with smooth, milk chocolate skin and fiery red hair. Her golden eyes peered down on the children as the azure blue and dark red eyes met her gaze. She smiled at the two beautiful blonde children before addressing Kushina. Lady Shina, it is good to see you again. I will notify the Raikage that you are here, but you will need to wait to enter until B and Yugito come. No problem, Karui-san. Mind if I ask you a question? I noticed something familiar in your chakra signature. Do you know if you had any Uzumaki in your family line? Kushina responded cheerfully. Karui's eyes widened at that, and she seemed to think before responding. I am sorry, Shina-sama, I do not know. I was orphaned in the last war before I really had the chance to get to know my parents or my lineage. An apologetic look fixed itself on Kushina's face. I am sorry, Karui-chan. What if I told you that I have a seal that could identify if you have any Uzumaki blood? Karui's eyes lit up at the suggestion. Really? That easy? Kushina nodded while her family looked on gaping. Fuck yeah, let's do it. Kushina chuckled at her enthusiasm before pulling the giant scroll of her back. She unrolled it to a certain point and paused once the required seal was laid out. Okay, Karui-chan, a little blood on your fingers, then a handprint on the center of this seal. Without hesitation, Karui cut her index finger and smeared some blood on her thumb and other fingers before slamming it onto the seal with enthusiasm. She looked up expectantly at Kushina to see her nodding her head and analyzing the changing seal. Karui couldn't take it anymore and let out a louder than intended, well. Kushina looked up from the seal and smiled at her. Yup, as I thought. 1/4 Uzumaki from your grandmother. Tears threatened to escape from Karui's golden orbs. That was until a loud and boisterous voice speaking in some form of rhythmic rap echoed from the hallway and into the waiting room. This seemed to snap Karui straight out of her daze, and she put an agitated look on her face before shouting. Damn it, B. Shut your trap and cease the incessant rap. She then looked aghast and clamped both hands over her mouth. All Uzumakis laughed openly at their long-lost relative before B entered the waiting room. Dang, Karui, that was hot, methinks you're a rapper, even if you claim not. B's exaggerated hand gestures made the Uzumaki kids laugh, but all of the grown women looked at B incredulously. Enko spoke what all Uzumakis were feeling, is this guy for real? B, the Raikage's 22-year-old younger brother, took a long moment to soak up Enko's form. His lips slowly parted into a moderate gape before his chin snapped up and a smirk plastered itself on his face. Yo, who is this little lady? She so wow, makes me wanna bring out the Hachibi. Unfortunately for the knucklehead rapper, this line also fell flat among the Uzumakis. So flat in fact that Enko burst out laughing. She bent over at the waist, slapping her knee and gasping for air. Oh, gasp, holy shit, gasp, that was, too, funny, she continued to gasp for air in between bouts of laughter. B cocked his head to the side as he looked at the laughing Kunoichi. He then looked to the other Uzumakis for a partial explanation of the Kunoichi's behavior, and his eyes fell on Naruto. The Hachibi didn't have to tell B, this boy was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, but there was something more than that. The thickness of his chakra was almost equal to the Biju themselves. Ey, yo, boyo, you can call me Uncle B, I carry the Hachibi. If I am right in my mind, you carry Mr. 9. The boy shook his head vigorously in a manner that actually interrupted B's poorly constructed rap sentence. B cocked his head again, translated body language demanding an explanation from the tiny blonde. The little boy looked uncomfortable before he firmed his resolve and looked up at the giant of a man. It is Mrs. 9, B-san. B's jaw dropped and Gyuki was equally stunned. he always thought that the leader of the demonic Kitsune clan was a male. Yuki came from a merging of demonic clans between powerful bulls and a sort of amphibian octopus. His clans merged in order to combat the might of the Kitsune clan. Then the sage, father that he was to the Biju, summoned Yuki to the human realm and imparted his chakra upon him and his siblings. That was a couple centuries ago, and Yuki never knew that the Kyuubi no Kitsune was a female. He didn't even know her name that whole time because the sage was the only one she told. Meanwhile, B seemed to remain stunned in front of the Uzumakis as an internal back and forth ensued. Finally, B knelt down in front of Naruto. My bad Lil, man, it wasn't no part of an evil plan. If you can tell Ms. 9 that we're sorry, you can cash in a favor from the mighty killer B. B smiled at the youngster and held out his fist. Naruto shook off his hesitation and bumped fists with the massive, silly man. Okay, Mr. B, I will remember that. Even if your rapping falls a little flat. B ruffled Naruto's hair in appreciation of the boy's first rap. He would make a disciple yet. As the two finished their exchange, Yugito, a 13-year-old genin from Kumo in the Jinchuriki of the Nibi no Nekomata, announced her presence. So, I see that this is Kumo's newest addition to its Jinchuriki ranks. Hiya, lil guy, I am Yugito ni and I house the Nibi no Nekomata. Naruto peeked around the massive frame of Killer B and saw a beautiful blonde girl, with her hair done in a long ponytail that reached her mid-back. She wore the standard gear of a Kumo genin with her hishiate sewn into her left shoulder. Her gentle purple shirt accentuated her spotless skin and chocolate brown eyes. Naruto smiled at her welcoming presence and was grateful to know somebody else who could understand him. Naruto stepped around the still kneeling frame of B and accepted Yugito's handshake. It is nice to meet you, Auntie Yugito. I am I am Ruto Maki, and I hold Ms. 9, as Uncle B said. Yugito smiled curiously at the kid. I told her that the kid was 5, but he was significantly more developed than any 5-year-old she had ever seen. Her first guess would have been 10. She shelved those thoughts for later and asked, Auntie. Naruto shuffled in a clear display of nervousness and his eyes shot to his feet. Well, Uncle B said that he is my uncle, so I thought that would make you my auntie. Yugito didn't have the easiest childhood nor the acceptance of her whole village. According to Naruto had it worse than she did. She decided to accept the familial affection and she pulled Naruto into a hug. The Uzumaki family watched on as their youngest member made fast friends with the Jinchuriki duo. The moment was shattered as a shout came from Ai's office, and Karui ushered them into the room. Naruto walked into the room with eyes wide in amazement. The room itself was pretty standard, but two things stood out to our blonde future hero. First, the massive figure of the Yondaime Raikage. Naruto was just a kid, but he could tell this man was powerful. Naruto shelved that thought as a kind smile stood out amongst the intimidating figure of Ai. The second thing that caught Naruto's attention was the view of the village that Ai had from his glass wall. The Raikage tower sat high upon the mountain and provided a stunning view of the village. Ignoring decorum, Naruto and Tayuya ran to the glass wall that looked over their new village. The kids pressed their faces to the glass in order to get the full view. The adults watched the cute, childish display with smiles on their faces. Naruto felt a massive hand rest on his shoulder before he heard Ai speak. Pretty cool, isn't it? Naruto nodded his head vigorously. Think you would like to become a shinobi that protects this village? Naruto's head was a blur of up and down motion. Okay then, why don't you two join your mother so we can get this started? Kushina smiled at the display of kindness from her husband's old rival and her current leader. Thank you for your kindness and hospitality, Raikage-sama. Kushina bowed to the Raikage and all Uzumakis followed her example. A massive mitt swished through the air. Think nothing of it, Kushina. I believe this will benefit everyone. So, you told me that Naruto is 5 years old, right? Kushina nodded at Ai's cocked eyebrow. Could you explain why he looks like he is almost 10 then? Kushina gulped. She hadn't told Ai of the demonic contract or the accelerated growth from the Kyuubi. She decided to air some of the truth and see how it was received. To the best of our knowledge, Kyuubi is accelerating Naruto's growth. He already has Chunin-level chakra capacity with nearly endless chakra reserves. In fact, he manifested a unique brand of the Uzumaki chakra chains while I was visiting you. I looked like a kid underneath the Christmas tree about to unwrap the biggest present. He was already excited enough to get the Uzumaki line to take root in his village. He was ecstatic to know that the boy already had an Uzumaki Kekai Genkei. How much better could this boy get? I steadied his voice before asking, unique. Anko stepped forward here. According to Shizune, apprentice of Tsunade, Naruto manifested chakra chains with an additional lightning element when he saved Tayuya from 3 thugs. Naruto, disposed of, said thugs. Anko's hesitation at reminding Naruto of the memory was palpable. Tayuya took Naruto's hand in hers and gave it a firm squeeze, which visibly relaxed the blonde's tense shoulders. I sighed at that. He hated when kids were dragged into the darkness of this world. I see. I am sorry you had to go through that, Naruto-kun. Want to take a fun test for me? Yes. Raikage Gigi. Naruto bounced with excitement as B fell over in a fit of laughter and Yugito failed to stifle a giggle. I sighed before he pulled something from his desk and stood up. The massive man walked in front of Naruto and got down on one knee. Kushina had her arm on Naruto's shoulder and her whole body was tensed and ready to spring into action. A calming look from Ai earned a moderate easing of her posture, but she was still a protective mother. I handed a piece of paper to Naruto. Okay, little guy, I want to check something really quick. Your mom told me you already know how to channel your chakra. Put this paper in between 2 fingers and channel chakra to them. Naruto looked to his mother for confirmation and then he channeled chakra into the paper after her nod. The paper sheared clean in 2 before 1/2 of the sheet dampened and the other crumpled. The figurative Christmas present I was ready to open earlier blew away every expectation he had. He wanted to find Santa Claus and give him a bone-crushing hug. Kushina noticed how the Raikage recoiled in surprise before recomposing himself and realized she would have to lay out some ground rules later on. I stood up and looked directly at Kushina. That is quite the kid you have there. I know that you want to protect him, and I know that you will most likely train him. What I wanted to know is if you would let him become my apprentice when he is 10. You can handle the foundational training, you can train with us when he becomes my apprentice and I will allow you unfettered access to him. I simply cannot ignore the potential this boy holds. Kushina tensed at the direct approach I was using. Truth be told, she didn't have many options. If Uzu was to be rebuilt, she would need to acknowledge this man as her leader and Naruto was one of the conditions for the blood contract. Kushina calmed herself before linking eye contact with the ferocity of a mother and a war hero. I will allow it as long as I am given some discretion when it comes to his training and the timing of his more worldly missions. I smiled at that. Of course, Kushina, we are bound by contract, and I will honor your wishes when it comes to his training. How about this little one here? I looked down at the young blonde girl. This here is Tayuya-chan, the girl my Sochi saved in Tanzaku Gai. She has a unique ability as well. We have not tested her affinities yet, but I can tell you she is most likely a wind type. She was subconsciously infusing her music with a genjutsu when Naruto met her. She uses a flute as a medium for this unique genjutsu. She is also confirmed half-blooded Uzumaki. I knew her mother before the fall of Uzushiogakure. On that note, your secretary, Karui-chan, is a quarter-blooded Uzumaki on her mother's side. If she wishes, she will be accepted into the Kumo branch of the Uzumaki family. I cocked an eyebrow at this. It certainly would explain the fiery temper and red hair. In fact, it made perfect sense. Good to know. Well, welcome to Yuya-chan. Do you wish to be a shinobi as well? Yes, Raikage-sama. If I don't, who will protect Shithead on his missions? The girl offered the reply with such simplistic spunk, that I couldn't help but crack a smile. B fell to the ground in another fit of laughter and a couple Bolt agents snickered. Very well, I will get your papers worked up. Children start the academy in Kumo at age 8, so you two have a couple years to get ready. Kushina, anything else you would like to address at this time? Kushina nodded and pulled out a medium-sized scroll out of one of her hidden seals. Working with the kids on the way here gave me this idea. If your academy is anything like Konoha's, then it is woefully inferior to the Uzumaki education system. In order to help my children and the future generations of Kumo, I offer this as a gift of goodwill for all of your assistants. I would encourage you and your shinobi to look through it and maybe use my children's age group as a test run. I am sure you won't be disappointed. I cocked an eyebrow before Yugito spoke up. How, exactly, is it better? Her tone offered challenge and a slight bit of offense. Kushina responded without hesitation. Well, kiddo, I don't know if your history covered much on the Uzumaki clan. For generations, an Uzumaki genin was worth a mid-ranked shunin, and that was on average. An Uzumaki prodigy was on the same scale as Hashirama Senju, case in point Mito Uzumaki. That came from strong educational foundations, a knowledge of Fuinjutsu, and the development in understanding of chakra from the beginning. Sure, history is nice to know and it is somewhat necessary, but will it be the deciding factor on the battlefield? Will your knowledge of past exploits stop the kunai from killing you? Or, how many of your genin know of or are even familiar with the current ninjas in the bingo book? Those are just a few examples, Yugito-san, of how I know the Uzumaki education system was superior. Yugito's eyes drifted to her feet and her challenging attitude was truly humbled. I got the childlike Christmas look again and B was simply nodding along. I then realized what she said. Wait, Kushina, are you telling me that Uzumaki Fuinjutsu lessons are included in this curriculum? Kushina nodded proudly. Yes, that is what I am telling you. Of course, I am holding stuff back. I have provided Fuinjutsu levels 1 through 3 in that scroll. In Uzu, genins would graduate from the academy as level 6 Fuinjutsu journeyman. For now, I would ask you to settle on level 3 since most children will not have the genetic predisposition to Fuinjutsu. We will take what we can get, Kushina. For now, why don't you let B and Yugito show you to your new compound so you may get settled in? Shimanko-san, I paused here and looked at Anko with a ridiculous smirk on his face. Nice name, here is your Hishiate. I will give you a couple weeks to get settled in. Report to me when you are ready to resume active duty. Anko nodded and accepted the new Hishiate. She hated her new alias, but she couldn't bring herself to totally part from her given name. B and Yugito walked the Uzumaki clan to their new compound, a very nice place settled on a plateau in the mountain right next to Ai's compound. B told Naruto that he would stop by from time to time to check in on him and help train him. The Uzumakis bid farewell to the Jinchuriki duo and enjoyed exploring their new home. 3 years later, Intro Academy life. 3 years passed in a flash for Naruto and the Uzumaki family. Kushina, or Lady Shina as most of the Kumo public knows her, accepted the role as head of education. She did full reviews of the core curriculum and garnered support to institute the changes to the Kumo Academy. She planned it out perfectly so Naruto and Tayuya would be among the first generation of the newly trained students. She also got the council to concede on pushing the age of enlistment back from 12 to 14. She cited death rates among new genin, abysmal mission success rates among genin teams and other relevant stats to validate this change. Despite her reforms, there were still many ways for Kumo to conscript younger shinobi. I'm making Naruto his apprentice and Anko taking Tayuya as an apprentice would override the age of conscription. It was planned to take the apprentices out on joint missions or joint training trips during the breaks in the academy. However, apprentices were not granted full shinobi status until they graduated from the academy, so Naruto would be safe from dangerous missions for now. The Uzumaki family also made rapid and vast impacts on the Kumo shinobi population. One of the positive effects of teaching your whole family journeyman level fuinjutsu is that they can manufacture tags that shinobi use in everyday life. That is doubly so when one member of your family has nearly cage level reserves, even if most of those reserves were untapped. The Uzumaki clan is a whole pumped out ceiling tags, explosive tags and other Uzumaki tags that flew off the shelves of every shinobi store in Kumo. This provided a steady income for the clan and, in addition to Kushina's efforts, made the Maki clan of Kumo become one of Kumo's most influential families. It is my goal to write out the names we all know and love while telling the story. The aliases will be used in public settings like talking or when their aliases are needed due to their situations. Kushina knew that her family would need to be prepared for the adversity ahead, so she buckled down on their training for the 3 years they had. At 6 years old, 7 for Tayuya, she taught the children the Shadow Clone Jutsu. It was uniquely suited to Uzumaki shinobi, despite the Leaf claiming it is their original technique meant for Jonin-level ninjas. Naruto was much better suited to the jutsu than Tayuya due to his massive reserves and healing factor, but Tayuya could still produce a single clone at the age of 6. If one stopped in on the Maki family regularly, they would see a couple shadow clones of a fierce blonde woman instructing 2 little blonde girls and an ever-growing horde of little blonde boys. Kushina trained the children up on the basics every day. The mornings would start with a rigorous workout. For starters, the children would perform a growing number of push-ups, air squats, sit-ups, burpees, chakra jumps. The kids would channel chakra to their legs and jump as high as they could, and weighted lunges. After the first round of this, they would run to the base of the mountain and back up again. Upon their return, they would do one more round of the physical exercises and then eat breakfast. After breakfast was an introduction to meditation, not one of Kushina's strong suits, but Yugito helped significantly with instructing the children on proper meditation. Kushina used some of Yugito's practices to help refine her own meditation as well. After meditation came studies until lunchtime. The studies covered all of the basics for shinobi life like hand seals, chakra theory, chakra natures, known Kekai Genkei of the elemental nations, politics and etiquette decorum training. The last one required I to find a proper tutor for since Kushina never really understood those lessons. After lunch, Kushina forced Kenjutsu and Taijutsu katas down the children's throats for 3 hours. Once that was completed came the daily dose of chakra control exercises. Kushina was good at tweaking the normal exercises and making games out of the. She constructed a series of earth pillars for the children to climb using the tree climbing technique, and she would have them play tag on the pillars. She dug into the mountain a bit and paid B with some sake to fill in the dugout with water. She would have the kids play on, meditate on or lay down on the water's surface to increase chakra control and capacity. I would stop by frequently to check on his new clan and see the progress of his future apprentice. Needless to say, he was impressed. So impressed, in fact, that he sent a couple of the prominent children of Tayuya's age to join them in their training and fun. Kushina was initially reluctant, but after seeing the smile on her Sochi's face at having new friends, she relented. It was this collection of childhood friends that would define Kumo's future. The group composed of Naruto, Tayuya, Samui, Mabui, Atsui and Omoi. They became fast friends, and the girls became keenly interested in our intrepid blonde. Speaking of Naruto, the boy's growth rate was remarkable. His understanding of Fuinjutsu matched Kushina's own. While Tayuya was stuck on level 2, Naruto was on level 4 by the time he joined the academy. The 8-year-old Naruto also looked like he was 13. Upon entering the academy, he stood at 5 foot 7 inches with a cut build that made him look like a manga character named Gohan from his favorite manga. Every inch of the body was composed of tight-knit and lean muscle, except for his boyish face. His unnatural growth made him tower over his friends and other kids of his age group. Kushina's least favorite side effect of this was the growing number of fangirls varying from ages 10 to 16, which Kushina found simultaneously cute and immensely annoying. Kushina worked directly with Naruto every day to learn and control his chakra chains. Like most Uzumaki, Naruto's chains initially sprouted out of his back, directly behind the primary chakra point, his heart. It took Naruto a year to develop his control enough to manifest chains from his hands, and he was still practicing to use them like his mother did. Kushina was surprised to see that the base nature of the chains was Raiden, lightning release. This made Kushina focus on elemental nature training with Naruto during their one-on-one times. It took him 3 years to complete his stage 3 lightning nature manipulation, but it gave him far greater control over his chakra chains. Unfortunately, his chakra control was still only mediocre because of the ludicrous and ever-growing amount of chakra that he had at his disposal. Naruto's second visit to the Kyuubi happened a couple months before he was supposed to start at the academy. B and Yugito stopped by regularly to instruct him on various shinobi arts, but they recently taught how to properly contact his Biju through meditation. Neither of them knew that Hikari was watching the whole time, but she wanted to see if he could reach her on his own. Hikari was waiting until Naruto was mentally mature enough to hold a decent conversation and understand more serious topics. She decided it was about time to rekindle the relationship before her vessel entered the human academy. During one of the morning meditation session, Naruto felt a deeper pull on his consciousness than he had felt before. He eagerly allowed the pull to guide him until he found himself in that same verdant field. It was sunny this time, and Naruto noticed how much livelier it all felt. There were even animals such as oversized rabbits, massive boars and killdeer that ran fleetingly around the forest. Naruto made the trek over the hill and into the cottage for the second time. Naruto entered the cottage to find Kyuubi sitting there waiting for him. A second cup of tea was sitting on the coffee table, positioning Naruto across the table from the Kyuubi. Naruto couldn't help but marvel at her nearly divine beauty. Recently, Naruto noticed that he was starting to have weird thoughts about girls, like taking an extra second to peek at Anko-ne when she was coming out of the shower, or thinking about Tayuya's soft lips when she was playing the flute for him. He talked to his sister Anko about it, because he didn't dare talk about something so scandalously awkward with his Ka-chan. Anko laughed and told him his accelerated growth probably meant that he was going through puberty. Naruto shuddered at the thought and shook off the reminiscences as he sat down and took a sip of the warm tea. "How do you like the tea, Naruto-kun?" The melodic voice of the Kyuubi drew Naruto in. It is very good. Kyuubi-sama, did you call me here today?" Naruto's boyish voice was deepening, but when it cracked when Naruto said, "Sama," the beautiful nine-tailed kitsune couldn't suppress an ethereal giggle. "First, enough with the Sama. What I plan to discuss with you today will let you know why I said that. Second, yes, I decided it was time for us to speak again. Your first visit wasn't planned, and you were not mature enough to understand at the time." "I understand, Q." Naruto stopped there and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "I'm sorry, it just feels weird calling you Kyuubi all the time. Would you honor me with your name?" The kitsune smiled radiantly over her cup of tea. It seems he may actually be ready to understand some things. "Yes, Naruto-kun, my name is Hikari. Please do not share it with Gyuki or Matabi. Their frustration in not knowing my name has become a game of sorts between us." Naruto's eyes lit up. He always could appreciate a good prank. He smiled as the memory of Anko's exploding pillows came to mind. He and Tayuya laughed so hard when they walked into Anko's room to see her with a mouthful of feathers and feathers all over the room. Ah, good times, unlike dealing with Anko's revenge spree, that was downright terrifying. "Hikari, that is a beautiful name. It truly becomes you. So, Hikari, what did you call me here to talk about?" Naruto threw a leg over his knee and sat back in the love seat to enjoy the tea. Hikari blushed at Naruto's natural compliment. "Tea, thank you, Ruto-kun. I know you are rather young, but I called you today to discuss our mating contract and to discuss the demonic realm." Naruto spit out his mouthful of tea in a geyser-like fashion. Good thing this was a mindscape. Hikari cleared the mess away with a flick of her tails. Mating C contract. Hikari nodded like it was no big deal. Yes, your mother has a copy of the contract that you may review when you leave the seal. It was a deal I made with your father during that cursed night. I know your mother has told you about that night and how she was my previous Jinchuriki. Do say hello to her for me, will you? Naruto nodded stupidly at that and shook the haze out of his head before responding. Hikari-chan, if you don't mind me asking, why would you want someone like me as a mate? Hikari sighed at this. The remnants of the mental trauma the child went through completely crushed the child's ego. He has gotten better over time, but his low self-esteem and desire to improve stems from what that cursed village did to him. Naruto-kun, I want you to understand this. You grew up either next to me or with me and you. I know you better than you likely know yourself. You have a pure heart, and an iron will, not to mention you are intensely loyal and family-oriented. All of these qualities are important in a mate. I felt all of that potential when you were still a kid in your mother's belly. You have since proven me right. Tears welled in Naruto's eyes. He may be a fast-growing boy, but he was still a child, albeit a mature one. Thank you, that is the nicest thing anybody has ever said to me. You're most welcome. The reason I chose you is also because of my mating cycle, which is coming up in 12 years or so. Kitsune only go through mating cycles every other century, you see. I chose you because you were already capable of becoming a Hanyu, a half-demon, due to gestating near my yokai. I have completed that transition over the past 8 years, which is why you have grown so fast. Naruto's eyes lit up as a key puzzle piece connected in his mind. So, is that why other Jinchuriki don't grow as fast as I do? Yes. It is doubtful that other Biju, which are special demons that were augmented by the Sage of the Six Paths Chakra, would mate with their partners. I do not even know if they are capable. Matabi and I are the only female demons in the Biju. Naruto nodded along before a question struck him. Hikari-chan, thank you for all you have done for me. You mentioned the demonic realm earlier and I wanted to know why you didn't go back there to find a mate. Sadness flitted upon the kitsune's entrancing red eyes. Naruto almost went over to comfort her, but the look disappeared before he could move, and he got his answer. For some reason, us Biju have had our link to the demonic realm severed. There were portals that occurred naturally in the past, but Gyuki, Matabi and I haven't sensed one in over a century. It may be linked to us Biju getting sealed, which first happened because of that cursed Baka Hashirama. Naruto looked down fixedly at his teacup. I see. I am sorry, Hikari-chan. It is not fair that you cannot return home. Well, if you will have me as your mate, then I guess I just need to know what that means. I will do whatever I can. Hikari's melodious chuckle filled the sitting room. Well, thank you, Naruto-kun. First things first, your transition to Hanyu is complete. We wouldn't have been able to mate without that happening. I am sure you noticed that you have acquired some stronger urges. Naruto nodded at that one, he sure had. Well, male demons are normally quite aggressive when it comes to mating. As you continue to grow, your urges will too. Naruto cocked his head. Why did you say aggressive like that? The kitsune looked like she really didn't want to talk about that. Do you understand what mating entails? She smiled at Naruto's scarlet blush. Okay. Well, in the demonic realm battles are constantly fought over females that are in their mating cycle. I would have hundreds of males trying to lay their claim on me, which gets mighty annoying I may add. They would fight amongst themselves, and the stronger ones would challenge me for the right to mate. Among weaker demons that means females are often raped, which means forced activity. It is a vulgar custom that I, and every other female demon, abhors. That is why I am glad that I got to choose my mate. It was one of the main reasons I accepted your father's contract proposal. Naruto's blush turned a cherry red when he thought about mating with this exquisite entity. Hikari-chan, if you are in the seal, how can we mate? Hikari's face turned flush at this question, but she forced it down. Well, I created this seal, Ruto-kun. I can leave it from time to time without killing you. As long as we remain close together, I will be able to exit the seal about once a week. It puts a tremendous strain on your chakra coils though. Naruto's face lit up at that. You mean, we could spend time together outside of the seal? Kyuubi chuckled at the boy's excitement. In time, Ruto-kun. Now that you have become a Hanyu, you will start growing tails of power and your features will become more kitsune-like. Your mother will need to come up with a seal to hide those. Your body is absorbing the ambient chakra I exude, and your first tail should come in when you are around 10. For me to leave the seal, you will need to be at 3 tails of power so that me leaving doesn't immediately kill you. Naruto's blush disappeared and he turned pale. I am going to have a tail. When Hikari let out a truly enchanting laugh and nodded, Naruto took a minute to process that. He then got a serious look on his face. Okay, Hikari-chan, as the rightful queen of the kitsune, how can I become the best mate for you? Oh, thank Kami, I chose right when I chose this child. So genuine and eager to please. Thought Hikari. Well, my mate will need to be strong. You have 12 years or so to get strong. If you get stronger on your own, you may be able to grow tails faster than by simply absorbing my ambient chakra. I will need a strong mate to protect my kits. Hikari's jovial tone died, and her face fell as she spoke. Naruto darted over to her and got down on his knees. Hikari-chan, did you have kits before? Hikari nodded her head and let out remorseful tears. Naruto pulled her into a hug and ran his hand down her back. He didn't need to ask anymore. I will get strong enough to protect you, strong enough to protect Ka-chan and Anko-chan and Tayuya-chan and everyone else. I promise you on the Uzumaki name, Hikari-chan. Hikari didn't doubt this boy, it was why she chose him. That gut feeling that the Sisters of Fate and Kami schemed together to put this child in her life. She simply rested her head on the surprisingly well-toned chest. Then she smelled something unique that took her a minute to register. Oh, Kami, the boy's body has reached maturity and those are pheromones. Kushina is so not going to be happy about this. Anyo, Naruto-kun, there is something I need to tell you about your Hanyu transition. You are going to become very aggressive and very horny as you continue to go through puberty. The longer you fight the impulses, the stronger they will get. You will need to find some way to blow off some steam. In time, maybe some of your girlfriends could help with that. Naruto cocked his head and looked awkwardly at her. Hikari-chan, can't I just come into the seal and do that with you? I don't want to cheat on you, it feels dirty just thinking about it. Hikari sighed. She really should have thought the rate of growth through. There is no way she is going to have with an 8-year-old. Maybe in a couple years, but he needs to mature a bit more before she would indulge in any of that. Look, Ruto, this is your mind. It may hamper the urges a little bit, but only doing so in the real world will truly relieve them. For now, you are too young, and the urges shouldn't get too strong so long as you control your emotions. Hikari got a mischievous look on her face. I will make you a deal though. When you acquire your 3rd tail, I will come out of the seal and spend a night with you. A fire appeared behind Naruto's eyes. He didn't understand the intricacies of what they were talking about. He felt the urges, but he could deal with them. But if all he had to do to earn this beauty's love was get stronger, then that was something he could understand. For Uzumaki Naruto, love was always the most important thing. Love of life, love of friends, love of country and love of family above all.